Chapter 28:37. Ghost soldiers cross the border, carry the coffin and fight to the death. This sentence had been passed down for countless years, and it was unknown how many experts had been deterred by this terrifying sentence. At this time, they finally had the opportunity to witness this scene. These ghost soldiers all carried a terrifying aura, and each of them was a super ancient expert. They were already experts from a long time ago, and after going through the sacrificial ceremony of the underworld, they had become even more terrifying. Kill! The battle cries continued, and there was no time to rest at all. These ghost soldiers directly rushed towards Yi Qianqian to kill. In the blink of an eye, Yi Qianqian was already surrounded by these ghost soldiers. The strength of these ghost soldiers was extremely terrifying, and it was unknown how many years it took for the underworld to collect these ghost soldiers. In the countless years of history of the heavens, it was unknown how many peerless experts had died, and now, these peerless experts had become the ghost soldiers of the underworld. The rumbling sound of the army marching caused even the heavens and the earth to change color. Yi Qianqian's expression also changed. If she was an emperor, then these ghost soldiers might not be a threat to her, but she currently did not have such means. Ha 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 ha! In front of my ghost soldiers of the underworld, even an emperor would have to retreat. The black-robed man laughed loudly. Arrogant! Yi Qianqian snorted coldly. And at this moment Yi Shiwen, who was still in the midst of the heavenly tribulation, suddenly threw out a ray of light. This ray of light directly broke the heavenly tribulation, and then rushed into the group of ghost soldiers. Boom! This ray of light suddenly exploded, revealing one of the flags. Demon Summoning Flag. At this critical moment, Yi Shiwen threw out the Demon Summoning Flag, and at that moment, a huge crack was torn on the Demon Summoning Flag, and the sky was filled with demon aura. Countless demon kings rushed out, and with Yi Shiwen constantly feeding them with the blood essence and emperor source of quasi-emperors, these demon kings were now fat beyond recognition, and had regained some of the prestige they had in ancient times. Yi Shiwen did not use it under the heavenly tribulation, because it would instead strengthen the heavenly tribulation, which was disadvantageous to him. But now, to fight against the ghost soldiers, this demon summoning flag was necessary. That's the demon summoning flag? Many people exclaimed, how come the demon flag is in Yi Shiwen's hands? How many treasures does he have? Many people were already a bit numb. Yi Shiwen's enemies were formidable and dreadful. In fact, they had even dispatched more than one Dao tool. However, Yi Shiwen had blocked all of them. Yi Shiwen's strength was extremely formidable. Moreover, he had the help of powerful allies. He was by no means an ordinary person. Many demons even felt the call of the demon summoning banner in their bloodline. From the moment the demon summoning banner was born, it was given an important mission. The ancestors of the demon clan all swore a heavy oath and even placed a part of their nascent souls into the demon summoning banner, so that they would never betray it. This importance was passed down from generation to generation through the bloodline. It was just that the demon summoning flag had been damaged for a long time, and they had almost forgotten this call. Now that the mark in their bloodline had recovered, they all remembered this call. Many people thought of the ancient heavenly court and the glory of the ancient great demon. Countless years ago, the demon race also had an incomparably glorious era. Looking from afar, the ghost army and the demon army that rushed out of the demon summoning banner were like two raging tides that fiercely collided with each other. In an instant, it was unknown how many demon kings and ghost soldiers were blown up. Both sides were almost evenly matched. It was hard to separate them. What other tricks do you have now? Yi Qianqian's face revealed a slight smile. She looked indifferently at the black-robed man and said, "Damn it." The black-robed man couldn't help but be a bit stunned. He didn't expect that Yi Shiwen would actually have such a trick. The demon summoning banner was actually in his hands. Such a treasure should belong to our ghost kingdom. With the demon summoning banner, Our underworld can control the world's demon race and become invincible. The black-robed man roared and said, "We also want to live under the sun. The ghost kingdom will soon dominate the world." Courting death. Yi Qianshan said coldly, "Now is the time to clean up the traitors." Yi Qianshan shot forward like an arrow and directly rushed in front of the black-robed man, clashing directly with him. Bang! 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 The sound of fierce collisions was endless. The entire area had become a huge battlefield. There were battles that exceeded the limits everywhere. Usually, such battles might not even happen, but now they could be seen everywhere. All of this was caused by Yi Shiwen's tribulation. This made everyone's evaluation of Yi Shiwen increase again and again. This person had infinite possibilities for improvement. As the old saying goes, you can see what kind of person you are from the level of your enemies. Yi Shiwen was able to attract those powerful enemies to use Dao tools to deal with him. To a certain extent, it also served as a foil to his strength. It was impossible for ordinary people to even get a glance from these powerful enemies. Just when everyone thought that this was all, a new unforeseen event occurred. A terrifying aura erupted, engulfing more than half of the universe, evoking the fear in everyone's bloodline. The pressure from the bloodline even made everyone feel the urge to kneel down even though they were far away from the universe. A huge foot descended from the sky. It didn't dodge or evade, and directly stepped into the tribulation cloud, and directly stepped in the direction of Yi Shiwen. Rumble! Just this foot trampled through the heaven and earth. The earth quaked and the mountains shook and heaven and earth wailed. Wherever this big foot passed, countless heavenly tribulation lightning people had no time to dodge. They were trampled and exploded. Even the few quasi-emperor lightning people did not have the slightest difference. They were directly trampled and exploded. Under the tribulation cloud, above the sky, Yi Shiwen's demon wings spread out behind him and constantly flapped the sky. That blow just now almost trampled him to death. This foot directly penetrated the clouds. It could even be said that it did not care about the heavenly tribulation that was still flashing with lightning and thunder. The heavenly tribulation could not hurt this foot at all. Even the quasi-emperor could be killed by the heavenly tribulation. Only the emperor could completely ignore it. Their bodies were truly indestructible. Except for the Dao tools composed of the great ways, no other mortal things could hurt their bodies. And in this era where the emperor did not appear in the world, the answer was obvious. The emperor's corpse that had brought great trouble to the allied forces of the various races had finally appeared. This was the worst situation that Yi Shiwen had imagined. Even the previous waves of attacks that intercepted Yi Shiwen were not the most troublesome, because the real big trouble was waiting for Yi Shiwen here. Yi Shiwen, today is the day you die. The aloof and cold voice came from the depths of the universe. Who else could it be but DNI? Sure enough, as Yi Shiwen had expected, it was DNI who had controlled the emperor's corpse. Only he, who had the opportunity to become an emperor, could approach the emperor's corpse and control it. If it were anyone else, even Mahasvara could not do it. DNI, now everyone is looking for you everywhere. How dare you come out now? Yi Shiwen was not the slightest bit moved in the face of this scene. Although this was the worst situation that he had expected, it was still within his expectations after all. Humph, who can kill me? DNI snorted and said. Indeed, now that he had occupied the emperor's corpse, he was almost invincible. Although he could not really break out the powerful strength that belonged to the emperor, the possibility of killing him was not high. Don't be too arrogant. Those who are too arrogant will die faster. Yi Shiwen said coldly. You are talking about yourself. It is time for you to pay your debt. Dini's cold and ruthless voice came. Yi Shiwen looked around. The Lightning People army that had been trampled had begun to revive gradually. Many of them rushed towards the emperor's corpse. Whoosh! A huge whistling sound came. It was a huge hand that was about to penetrate the tribulation clouds again and fall down. The endless tribulation clouds that seemed invincible could be penetrated so easily. This made many experts who were watching from afar gasp. They thought that they had overestimated the strength of the Emperor-level masters. However, seeing the performance of the Emperor's corpse, they suddenly realized that they had underestimated it. "Boy, you helped me last time. I will repay you this time. Hurry up and cross the tribulation. Let me consume less of my energy." Suddenly, a voice resounded in Yi Shiwen's mind. Then, a blood-red ray of light soared into the sky. It broke through the blue dome of heaven and the tribulation cloud, and went to meet the big hand that was slapping down. Buzz! A silent collision. The waves set off drowned everything. All the waves entered the chaos that was torn apart. They were all swallowed up. Nothing was left. What is that? Many people opened their eyes wide. It seemed that they wanted to see what could block the sneak attack of the Emperor's corpse. A figure appeared. His whole body was blood-red. He was holding a long sword in his hand. It exuded a shocking blood-red light. The blood-red law was raging, forming a terrible storm. He had used this long sword to repel the sneak attack of the Emperor's corpse. And in front of him is you. That huge Emperor corpse has also appeared. That attack just now had shattered the space he was hiding in, so he had no choice but to appear. At this time, everyone finally saw the true face of the Emperor's corpse for the first time. Especially those experts who did not participate in the expeditionary force. For the Emperor's corpse, even if there were pictures, they could not describe the horror of the Emperor's corpse. Many people's eyes were on the blood-red figure. The horror of the Emperor's corpse was needless to say. So, what could block the Emperor's corpse? Was it another Taoist tool? Chapter 28:38. Everyone realized that they were already numb. They were completely numb. They didn't feel anything when they saw the doctrine instrument. Wasn't it just a small doctrine instrument? Yes, after seeing so many Tao artifacts in a row, they no longer had the same sense of mystery and adoration towards Tao artifacts as before. Yi Shiwen was incredible. He was really going against the natural order. "It's you again. Don't even think about escaping today." Dini's voice came from the Emperor's corpse. There was a bit of anger in his voice. It could be said that the sword of Avicii had swallowed the Tianqi Emperor's sword right under his nose. To the Tian clan, the loss of an incomplete Tao artifact was a huge matter. To the complacent him, it was also a huge blow. Not to mention that he had an even greater scheme. If he was able to seize this ominous sword that had swallowed the Apocalypse Emperor sword, then his strength would rise by another huge leap. Unless a true imperial monarch made a move, otherwise no one would be able to pose a real threat to him. Originally, he didn't have such an ability. But now that he had taken control of the Emperor's corpse, he had the capital to fight against the doctrine instrument. Escape? Ha 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 ha, little boy, when I was conquering the world, who knows where you were drinking milk? The sword of Avicii sneered and said, "Well, then come and let me see." Dni said coldly, "You want to go against the natural order with just a celestial instrument?" Clang! The sword of Avicii walked step by step toward the Emperor's corpse that Dni had taken control of. He was expressionless, and his body exuded wisps of blood-red killing intent. Wherever he passed, there were bursts of explosions. The world shook violently and was collapsing. The Tao power that the Emperor's corpse exuded was torn apart by his killing intent. It couldn't do anything to him. Humph! Dni smirked coldly. Rays of blood-colored radiance shot down from his body, almost crashing down in the direction of the sword of Avicii. He didn't even need any weapons. The Emperor's corpse itself was the strongest weapon in the world. Except for the doctrine instrument, other celestial instruments couldn't even break its defense. Naturally, he had nothing to fear. The sword of Avicii emitted a dazzling brilliance. It instantly turned into a sword aura that swept across 30,000 miles. It directly slashed down, smashing the stars and shattering the sky. Bang! With a loud crash, both sides collided like peerless celestial artifacts on the spot. The shockwaves set off were like tsunamis, soaring into the sky and spreading out in all directions. Buzz, buzz, buzz! The void was trembling violently, groaning, but it didn't completely collapse. The heavenly Tao was reinforcing space, not allowing anyone to cause trouble. A direct collision between an Emperor corpse and a revived Tao item was absolutely rare, even rarer than a collision between Tao items. It could be said that it was something that only happened to men in countless years. Both sides did not gain the upper hand in this exchange. Although the Avicii sword was tyrannical, it was facing a real emperor's corpse at this time. If a real emperor was alive, then it was possible to take him down. On the other side, D&I didn't have it easy either, because he had to endure quite a lot of attack. After all, he wasn't a true emperor, and that was his biggest problem. After the first attack failed, the sword of Avicii's weapon spirit attacked again. Thousands of swords flashed across the sky, and all the murderous aura in the world gathered together in an instant, condensing into a terrifying power of the killing Tao. Walla lala! Countless swords flashed across the sky. Child's play, D&I sneered. He opened his hand and turned it into an 8 trigram in the void. This 8 trigram emitted the power of yin and yang. It didn't dodge, but directly suppressed the sword aura. Rumble! The intense collision was still going on. The boundless sword chi blasted out and directly blasted into the 8 trigrams, almost causing the 8 trigrams to explode in the void. But in the end, it was suppressed by the 8 trigram. The power of yin and yang was boiling on the 8 trigram. Once it attacked, death and life were tumbling. Both sides didn't hold back at all. Once they attacked, they used extremely strong power that could break the void. Child's play, what about now? The sword of Avicii's weapon spirit sneered. Clang! 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 The sound of swords flashing was heard, and countless swords flashed up to the sky, turning into balls of light that shot into the depths of the universe. Every sword aura was as big as a mountain, and they were all emitting majesty from the sword of Avicii. This was the power of the sword of Avicii when it was unsealed. It wasn't real swords flashing, nor was it real sword aura. When the sword of Avicii was awakened, the flowing energy was already about to break the sky. One could imagine how terrifying the power of the sword of Avicii would be once it was fully awakened. An emperor standing on one side of the universe could destroy the universe on the other side. It was definitely not just a legend. This is, D&I gasped. The power of the sword of Avicii when it was truly unsealed was terrifying. Even he, who was in the emperor's corpse, felt a bone-chilling coldness. One should know that this was originally impossible. With his cultivation, it was impossible to do anything to him. Moreover, he was in the emperor's corpse, so no negative state could affect him. Right now, to put it in his perspective, it was just like a true emperor monarch's blessed land. The seal had been undone, and it was invincible, to the extent where even he could feel it. Impossible! At this moment, all the spectators in the distance gasped in succession. The sword of Avicii was too powerful, and it was practically like the awakening of an imperial monarch. Even if all the other Tao artifacts were unsealed, they wouldn't possess such terrifying might. How did he do it? But D&I reacted quickly. A normal doctrine instrument could not exert such power unless it was in the hands of an emperor. Now that the sword of Avicii was behaving like this, there was only one possibility. That was, after he swallowed the Tianqi Emperor's sword, he combined the power of 2 doctrine instruments together. That was why there was such a possibility. Thinking of this, he became even more furious. The sword of Avicii swallowed the Tianqi Emperor's sword right under his nose and escaped right under his nose. But now, he only needed to unseal it and he could exert the power of a normal doctrine instrument at the peak. So, do you still think I can't kill you? the device spirit of the Sword of Avicii said coldly and calmly. Even though DNI was in the Emperor's corpse, he still felt a kind of pressure. Now I will let you feel how small you are. Even though you have entered the Emperor's corpse, you will never understand if you haven't entered this realm. The device spirit of the Sword of Avicii said coldly, how will you understand? If you haven't entered this realm, you will always be an ant. Clang, clang, clang. Countless long swords rushed out, instantly turning into long dragons that flew forward, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws, incomparably sharp. These long dragons were blood-red and they looked ferocious. They were extremely terrifying. Don't look down on me. I am someone who is destined to become an emperor. How dare you look down on me with just one attack? I think you must be tired of living. DNI was furious. Instead of retreating, he charged at the Sword of Avicii. The blood-red sword dragons that were charging down almost instantly arrived in front of him. Break for me! DNI roared and threw a punch. It landed on a crimson sword dragon in front of him. Boom! The sword dragon couldn't resist the attack of the Emperor's corpse at all. With just one punch, its entire body exploded and turned into a sky full of sword chi. The sword dragon couldn't hurt DNI, who was hiding in the Emperor's corpse. However, there was a crack on his fist. Although it quickly recovered due to the strong recovery power of the Emperor's corpse, this in itself represented a shocking sign. The forbidden Emperor hiding in the Emperor's corpse was not truly unsolvable, nor was it truly impossible to do anything about it. The sword dragons spat out by the Sword of Avicii could really hurt him. Boom! 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 DNI continued to attack, but the sword dragons in the sky were still bombarding him. He had no time to take care of the cut wounds. He could only rely on his strong recovery power to constantly recover. It was a fierce battle, even more amazing than the battles in other places. Everyone was dazzled. There were high-level battles everywhere. They were all super chaotic battles that they might not be able to see in their lifetime. Normally, it was already a rare experience to be able to see even one pair of them fight, let alone so many of them moving around. Yi Shiwen, who was originally in the Heavenly Retribution, didn't attract too much attention. Instead, he was completely ignored by everyone. Compared to the amazing battles in other places, although his battles were thrilling, they didn't seem to be so attractive. However, at this time, Yi Shiwen obviously didn't have time to care about what others were thinking. He kept flashing in the Heavenly Retribution. Every time he flashed, there would be a group of heavenly lightning soldiers pierced through and killed by him. He didn't know what kind of strong enemies might appear later, but he understood that if he continued to delay, some enemies who were originally hesitant would also join in. Then, it would evolve into a real disaster. Therefore, he had to pass the Heavenly Retribution as soon as possible. This was the best way to prevent those enemies from taking risks out of desperation. Those enemies kept joining in the Heavenly Retribution. Although there were disadvantages, it wasn't completely without benefit. Many Heavenly Lightning soldiers were also killed by them. Those Quasi-Emperor-level Heavenly Lightning soldiers were also seriously injured. They were no longer as powerful as before. Chapter 2839. Although the strength of these lightning people had been greatly reduced, it was obvious that the threat to Yi Shiwen was getting smaller and smaller. There was no way to compare them to the beginning. The lightning people who were constantly being killed were gradually suppressed by Yi Shiwen, and he completely gained the upper hand. They were constantly absorbed into the time robe, and his own strength was also improving at an astonishing speed. Yi Shiwen, who had the protection of the time robe, was not afraid of not being able to survive this quasi-emperor tribulation. What he was really worried about were the enemies hidden in the dark. Otherwise, he could completely survive the quasi-emperor tribulation by himself. Even the tribulation after the mutation and promotion was not that terrible for him. As the saying goes, the skilled are bold. How could Yi Shiwen be an ordinary person? These were desperate things for ordinary people, but for him they were not too big of a threat. At this point, Yi Shiwen did not hide anymore. The power of the time robe was fully activated, and the power of time circulated on his body. Coupled with his gilded tyrant form, he was simply invincible. No matter what lightning people were, they would be suppressed. Slowly, unknowingly, more than half of the endless army of lightning soldiers had already been killed by him. One could well imagine how fast he was killing them. Throughout history, it was very normal for quasi-emperors to take 8 to 10 years to undergo their tribulations. Some of them even took up to 100 years. Everyone's situation was different from each other. Not everyone could be like Yi Shiwen, who could cross the tribulation with such amazing efficiency. However, everyone was obviously numb at this time. Extraordinary people did extraordinary things. Yi Shiwen's tribulation could provoke such an earth-shattering reaction. So what if he crossed the tribulation faster? This was not a problem at all. Little Yi, hurry up and cross the tribulation. Don't tell me you really want me to kill this emperor and I. Suddenly, Yi Shiwen heard the Avicii sword's somewhat anxious urging voice. Yi Shiwen looked up and saw the Avicii sword's spirit holding the Avicii sword. The sword light in its hand clanged, and one after another sword light pierced through the heaven and earth, blasting towards D&I. Although D&I tried his best to resist, he was still at a disadvantage. Facing a fully unsealed Tao instrument spirit, he did not have much chance of winning. Although he had the protection of the Emperor's corpse, he was not the legendary Emperor. Moreover, without the Emperor's corpse, he would not be able to withstand the Avicii sword and would be killed completely. The sword of Avicii's weapon spirit was emitting a blood-red light, as if it was burning its life force. Such a powerful force was not without a price. Senior, doesn't it look like you have the upper hand? Yi Shiwen was startled, and then said with a smile, "Do you think this state of mine is normal? No matter how strong I am just a weapon spirit. This is the law of heaven and earth, and there is no way to change it. If it was not for the fact that the boy in front of me is not an emperor, I would not have been able to hold on for long." The Avicii sword's spirit said helplessly. In the eyes of many people, the weapon spirit of a Tao instrument was simply earth-shattering powerful. However, they themselves understood that most of their power was sealed in the Tao instrument. Only in the hands of an emperor could the Tao instrument unleash its most powerful power. If they wanted to recover to the strongest state, they had to pay a price. Without the support of the emperor's origin, every time the Tao instrument grew stronger, it would consume its own power. In order to cover the elites of the Phoenix clan to escape, the Phoenix robe directly recovered to the strongest state and blocked the siege of the Sky clan. However, because of this, its origin was injured, and it was in a deep sleep until now. Therefore, for those emperors' inheritances, the Tao instrument was a strategic nuclear weapon. In ordinary circumstances, they would not use it if they could. This was a method that hurt others and oneself, and the deterrent effect was greater than anything else. Although the Avicii sword had devoured the Tianqi Emperor sword and seemed to have merged the power of both sides, after all, it had not been completely merged. In addition, there was no one to control it. Now, every minute and every second that it erupted was consuming its own trump card and energy. He was only repaying Yi Shiwen's favor, not Yimo. There was no need to risk his life for Yi Shiwen's matter. "I understand, Senior. Please help me hold them off for a while. I will be ready soon." Yi Shiwen constantly bombarded the flowing power of time, mincing the heavenly lightning soldiers, not giving them a chance to recover. In fact, except for the quasi-emperor lightning soldiers, the others were too weak compared to Yi Shiwen. As long as they were bombarded, they would die tragically. Roar! Dini's crazed roar came from the emperor's corpse. "Damn you, sword of Avicii, I will let you know what the consequences of opposing me are. I will capture you and pull out your weapon spirit. I will torture you for all eternity until you die. Emperor Enai was completely enraged by the Avicii sword. How long had it been? His chest had already been pierced by the sword radiance. The power that could pierce through the entire universe, even he, who was in the Emperor's corpse, could not resist it. The Emperor's corpse was his greatest trump card and method, but it had been injured by someone. This made his heart bleed. You? The Avicii sword did not care, but its face was cold, and it continued to attack. As a Tao instrument, the horror of it was completely revealed at this time. It stood alone at the end of the universe, but it could cut off the world outside of the distant spacetime. It was like the resurrection of the legendary emperor, and its power was so strong that many quasi-emperors were about to collapse. Heavens, what kind of terrifying power is this? Is this the real power of the emperor level? Many quasi-emperors turned deathly pale. Even if they were given hundreds of millions of years, they still wouldn't be able to cultivate to such a level, because it was already a realm above them. If they wanted to erupt with such a combat strength, it was not something that could be achieved through bitter cultivation. They would have to step into the legendary realm for it to be possible. However, since ancient times, how many people had been able to step into that realm? Even the Emperor's corpse is going to be defeated today. It's simply unimaginable. Many divine kings were gasping, and they only felt chills all over their bodies. No, to say that it is going to be defeated, it has not reached that point yet. Someone said resolutely, although the sword of Avicii has the upper hand now, don't forget that it's just a weapon spirit. It must pay a price for forcefully reviving the Taoist weapon to this extent. It's impossible for there to be no price at all. Therefore, there must be a limit. Once the limit is exceeded, the situation will be reversed in an instant. Some old quasi-emperors had experienced a lot, and their insight was shrewd. Although the means of the emperor level could be said to be unfathomable and unimaginable, the principle was the same. At their level, they had already reached the point where they could see through the essence. Many people also saw that it was indeed so, and now it was time to see how far the Avicii sword could go. Although a Tao instrument was a deterrent, it was after all not the resurrection of a real emperor. At this time, obviously, DNI also saw this, and he kept roaring angrily. Let me see how long you can hold on. How long can you hold on? Wait until your source is completely burned. Let me see what you can use to fight against me. The Avicii sword just looked at him coldly, and continued to wave the Avicii sword in its hand. It suddenly shook with force, and suddenly a bigger and thicker sword light penetrated into the starry sky of the universe. The vast sky seemed to be forcibly torn apart by some power, and this was the power of an emperor level. This sword did not penetrate DNI again, but flew directly over his head, and then turned and fell down fiercely. Boom! This sword directly penetrated into the void, as if there was nothing there, but in just a moment, the void instantly exploded, and there was a scream. Then, from the cracked void, everyone saw a huge formation that was constantly operating, and countless experts of the Tian clan were operating this formation in their respective positions. This formation was constantly replenishing the energy of the Emperor Corpse, and maintaining the operation of the Emperor Corpse. Otherwise, how could DNI alone have the ability to operate the Emperor Corpse? That is, many people saw the formation and they were shocked. It turned out that there was a formation behind the Emperor Corpse to replenish its energy. But at this time, everything was destroyed. The formation was almost broken, and the old quasi-emperor who was maintaining the formation was directly cut in half. Although he was an quasi-emperor, it was obvious that if he wanted to participate in the confrontation of this level of power, he would also die. The other divine kings and divine lords were even more seriously injured, and the entire formation was broken. This was only one sword, just one sword, and the formation that Yi Shiwen could not do anything to was completely destroyed. You? DNI was furious. Obviously, the Avicii sword had seen through the energy transmission route behind him. He was too careless, too arrogant. How about it, boy? Do you still think that I can't kill you? I can't hold on for long, but the power to break the seal is more than enough to kill you. The Avicii sword grinned, and its expression was extremely ferocious, and it was full of killing intent. At this time, for the first time, D&I truly felt that there was always someone better than him, and that there was always someone better than him. Although he was strong, he was not invincible. I'll kill you! D&I rushed forward. At this time, he was very clear that it was unrealistic to defeat the Avicii sword in a short time, and he could only kill Yishiwen first. He swayed his spear, and directly pounced towards Yishiwen, but was completely seen through by the Avicii sword. It directly blocked him. At this time, Yishiwen had finally reached the final stage, and the heavenly lightning soldiers were no match for him at all. Under his attack, they were defeated. Chapter 2840. Yishiwen's entire body was like a ball of lightning, wreaking havoc on the entire battlefield, scurrying everywhere. Not a single celestial lightning soldier could stop his footstep. Bang! 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 Wherever he went, those celestial lightning soldiers simply couldn't stop his attack. The heavenly tribulation was no longer producing those celestial lightning soldiers, as it had already reached its peak. This was already the peak. It was simply impossible for an ordinary god-king to cross such a terrifying heavenly tribulation. However, Yishiwen had the time robe on his body, which could protect him completely. Only then could he resist those celestial lightning soldiers and attack wantonly. Although the spectators couldn't see clearly from afar, they could see that the entire range of the Sea of Lightning was constantly shrinking, which meant that more and more celestial lightning soldiers were being killed by him. Those who originally thought that Yishiwen might not be able to hold on and get killed by the lightning strikes had also shut their mouths at this time. However, Yishiwen's current appearance didn't seem to be able to hold on and get killed by the lightning strike. Time passed minute by minute, second by second. The fierce battle didn't stop even for a moment. Everyone's eyes were completely dazzled, and they couldn't wait to see the entire battlefield. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, which was better than 100 years of painstaking cultivation. Bang! South Pole Loose Practitioner blew up a huge fire phoenix with a punch, and continued to advance towards Hua Menghan. At this time, Hua Menghan's silhouette was getting fainter and fainter. She was only a wisp of her soul, so it wasn't easy for her to persist until now. Once her soul was completely consumed, the phoenix robe would fly away and wouldn't stay behind. Watch me kill you! South Pole Loose Practitioner's face revealed a somewhat ferocious expression. There were many dark spots on his body, which had been burnt by the Nan Mingli fire. He had suffered many losses in the process of fighting with Hua Menghan. He was simply depressed to death. Just a wisp of her soul controlling the Dao tool was enough to put him in such a difficult situation. He simply couldn't imagine how terrifying it would be once the Dao tool fully recovered. At this time, he was already regretting his involvement in this matter. However, he didn't have a way out. He must first destroy Hua Menghan's soul, and then retreat. Hua Menghan's expression didn't change in the slightest. The flame on her body was constantly burning, and the cold air couldn't invade her body. Everywhere she went, there was a sea of fire, turning the entire heaven domain into a fiery hell. This was her home field, where she could unleash all of her power. Otherwise, with just a strand of his primordial spirit, even with the help of a Dao tool, it would still be extremely difficult for him to deal with the late-stage Quasi-Emperor South Pole Loose Cultivator. Boom! 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 The Fire Phoenix and the Ice Dragon constantly collided in the void, looking like a dragon and phoenix fighting. However, the area of the Fire Phoenix was constantly shrinking, and its magic power was rapidly being consumed. The power that had been poured into it was also being consumed at an alarming rate. So what if you have a Tao artifact? Watch as I break your Tao artifact. The South Pole unfettered cultivator let out a roar and was about to rush in front of Hua Menghan. At the same time, an ice talisman was formed and flew towards Hua Menghan. Bang! Hua Menghan's soul was about to collapse when a huge roulette fell from the void and smashed the talisman into pieces. The void was still shaking violently. This roulette fell at an astonishing speed, piercing through the sky. 6 paths wheel. What is this? The South Pole unfettered cultivator was shocked. His all-out attack was actually broken by someone. How could he not be shocked? At this moment, a figure rushed into the battlefield in the blink of an eye. Sky-flipping seal. A huge seal descended from the sky, turning the world upside down, condensed in the seal, and fiercely fell. At this moment, the South Pole unfettered cultivator shook his body and swept out all the power in his body. The ice talisman suddenly rushed out and protected him. Boom! After a violent collision, countless spaces collapsed and were destroyed. One after another, huge black holes were formed, and even space passages were torn open, leading to unknown spaces. The power of this collision could be imagined. Puff! The South Pole unfettered cultivator spat out a mouthful of blood, which was filled with cold air, freezing the space. He felt that his internal organs were about to turn upside down, and every inch of his flesh was about to be torn apart. He almost fainted. Just the terrifying power brought about by this strike was enough to make him feel like he was going to collapse. He retreated again and again. At this time, he saw clearly who the figure in front of him was. Yi Shiwen. The South Pole unfettered cultivator's eyes widened. The person in front of him was indeed Yi Shiwen. Wasn't Yi Shiwen still crossing the heavenly tribulation? Their battlefield was outside of the heavenly tribulation, and it was reasonable to say that it was impossible for Yi Shiwen to come out. Even if he wanted to intervene in the heavenly tribulation, it should be extremely difficult. The main reason was that he didn't want to guess correctly. Therefore, he had focused all his attention on Hua Menghan. Who would have thought that because of this, he would be tricked by Yi Shiwen? He turned his head and was almost scared to death. He didn't know when the heavenly tribulation had disappeared without a trace. No wonder he didn't hear the loud roar at this time. It turned out that the heavenly tribulation had already passed, so Yi Shiwen could come out. Yi Shiwen, who had just crossed the heavenly tribulation, didn't look like an ordinary person. On the contrary, there was not the slightest change in his body, as if he had walked through the heavenly tribulation. He had also seen it a moment ago, so he was very clear about how terrifying the heavenly tribulation that Yi Shiwen had faced was, and how he had done it. Yi Shiwen's body had just finished crossing the heavenly tribulation, and the aura of the heavenly tribulation was still exuding. At the same time, his imposing aura was growing at an astonishing speed, constantly rising, as if there was no limit. Quasi-Emperor. This was a genuine Quasi-Emperor. The South Pole unfettered cultivator immediately recognized that this was indeed a genuine Quasi-Emperor, because the aura on his body was too familiar. This was the unique aura of a Quasi-Emperor level master, and not the aura of a God King like Yi Shiwen. Although Yi Shiwen was strong enough to kill a Quasi-Emperor before, but a God King was still a God King, and he hadn't crossed that line. If the previous Yi Shiwen only gave him a little threat, then the current Yi Shiwen gave him a fierce feeling of threat. It was as if a ferocious beast had just woken up from a deep sleep. This was a kind of power that was absolutely unimaginable to ordinary people, and it was difficult to truly understand how terrifying it was until he was in front of it. The South Pole unfettered cultivator was a bit flustered in his heart. He had never thought that Yi Shiwen would actually directly cross that line and cause such a big commotion. Even he felt that the probability of Yi Shiwen crossing the heavenly tribulation was not very high, but he didn't expect that Yi Shiwen would actually succeed. South Pole unfettered cultivator, do you still remember what you said to me before? Yi Shiwen came up and stood in front of Hua Menghan. This was an instinctive action, although it was only a wisp of Hua Menghan's soul, but for Yi Shiwen, protecting her had already become an instinct that went deep into his bones. Moreover, this time, Hua Menghan had come to his rescue, and he didn't know how many benefits she had promised him, which made Yi Shiwen even more touched. As long as you hand over the ice charm, I will spare your life and let you go, otherwise, don't even think about leaving today, Yi Shiwen said in a cold and indifferent manner. Yi Shiwen, don't go too far. South Pole Unfettered Cultivator's complexion turned extremely ugly. Yi Shiwen was really too insolent. He was an expert of the late stage of Quasi-Emperor realm, and was only half a step away from entering the peak of Quasi-Emperor realm, but Yi Shiwen, who had just been promoted to a little Quasi-Emperor, was so arrogant. How could he endure this? Too far? You have disturbed my tribulation. You should understand that this is an irreconcilable enmity between life and death, Yi Shiwen said in an ice-cold manner. For an expert, crossing the heavenly tribulation was almost a matter of life and death, and once someone intervened in someone else's tribulation, it was tantamount to a life and death enmity. Generally speaking, unless it was a life and death enmity, otherwise no one would intervene in someone else's tribulation, and if that person died, then it was fine, but as long as that person survived, then they would not leave the matter at that. No matter what era, no matter what race, this was a common thing. Are you going to hand over the ice character charm or not? Yi Shiwen said in an ice-cold voice. He did not intend to talk any nonsense with him. This is simply going too far. Since I, South Pole Unfettered Cultivator, no one has ever dared to threaten me like this. South Pole Unfettered Cultivator roared loudly, and took a step forward. His eyes burst into an astonishing burst of cold light, and his whole body exuded an astonishing cold energy, as if it was going to freeze the world. His cold energy almost froze the heavenly way, and even the great way seemed to wither under his cold energy. He had not yet attacked, but a terrifying power and imposing aura had already enveloped Yi Shiwen, so much so that he couldn't even budge. Although he had been in an extremely difficult situation when he was fighting with Hua Menghan, but that was because he had no way to deal with the Dao tool. Hua Menghan's soul was trapped inside the Dao tool, and he could only slowly wear her down, but it did not mean that he couldn't deal any damage. After all, he was a genuine expert of the late stage of Quasi-Emperor realm. It seems that you really want to court death. I don't want to start a massacre, but someone is tired of living. Yi Shiwen's imposing aura erupted, and the aura of a Quasi-Emperor completely overflowed in all directions. Chapter 2841. Yi Shiwen slightly sneered. His body's imposing aura exuded as if it was free. The aura of a Quasi-Emperor was much stronger than his original God-King realm. A peak God-King was merely a God-King. It was simply not on the same level as a Quasi-Emperor. Yi Shiwen was finally able to understand the true meaning of this sentence after entering this realm. Those were two completely different realms. Yi Shiwen didn't have a deep understanding of the legendary Emperor realm when he was still in the God-King realm. He could only make his own guesses. Now that he had truly stepped into this realm, he could already faintly sense that legendary realm. It seemed as if he could touch that legendary realm just by reaching out his hand. Of course, he knew that it was just an illusion, but he could indeed perceive it. This was the disparity between a God-King and a Quasi-Emperor. It was a world of difference. Yi Shiwen, I want you to know that you are merely at the initial stage of the Quasi-Emperor realm. The disparity between you and me cannot be calculated with reason. Antarctic Loose Practitioner took a step forward. You two are a pair of mandarin ducks who share the same fate. In an instant, the cold air spread throughout the entire universe. Yi Shiwen instantly felt as if a huge net had fallen from the sky and trapped him, making him unable to escape. It was as if his soul had been locked. No matter where he fled to, he wouldn't be able to escape, and he would face the pursuit of death. Freeze for me. All of a sudden, South Pole Loose Practitioner moved. His fist moved and blasted towards Yi Shiwen. It seemed as slow as a snail, but at the same time, it seemed as fast as lightning. It completely distorted everyone's perception of time and space. This was the performance of an extremely strong expert. His research on the ice character charm had reached an earth-shattering level. In fact, there weren't many people who could stand shoulder to shoulder with him. Everyone who saw this scene was scared silly. They didn't know when that fist would fall on Yi Shiwen's body. This fist was earth-shattering. South Pole Loose Practitioner had exerted his strength to the extreme. He didn't even use this much strength when he was dealing with Hua Menghan. He knew that if he couldn't quickly kill Yi Shiwen, then the consequences would simply be unimaginable. That huge fist was getting bigger and bigger in front of Yi Shiwen, and everything in its path was frozen into a world of ice crystals. While everyone was holding their breath, Yi Shiwen finally moved. He opened his mouth and let out a loud shout. It seemed like the first sound in the world. His shout condensed into a monstrous, imposing aura and soared into the sky. "Insignificant tricks! How dare you embarrass yourself in front of me?" Yi Shiwen roared and blasted his fist out, which directly collided with South Pole Loose Cultivator's fist. Boom! An astonishing collision sound was heard. The ice and the flame on Yi Shiwen's fists collided with each other. Ice and fire collided with each other. The deadlock only lasted for a moment. Then, Yi Shiwen's flame directly annihilated the ice and blasted out at an astonishing speed. Rumble! That wave of energy directly rushed in front of South Pole Unfettered. Bang! It directly blasted into South Pole Unfettered's body. South Pole Unfettered groaned and retreated again and again. His feet directly inserted into the void with each step, and the void couldn't bear the power of this collision. South Pole Unfettered's complexion turned snow-white, and a trace of blood flowed out of the corner of his mouth. His internal organs had been directly injured in that collision. Behind him, countless ice characters had manifested, and many of these characters had transformed into the Great Tao to support him. Otherwise, he would have died a long time ago. How is this possible? South Pole Unfettered couldn't help but spurt out a mouthful of blood, and looked at Yi Shiwen in disbelief. Yi Shiwen had just crossed the heavenly tribulation, and was still in the adaptation period. Even if he had passed the adaptation period, he would only be at the initial stage of the Quasi-Emperor realm, nothing more. How could he be so strong? Suddenly, he remembered many legends related to Yi Shiwen. This human was not an ordinary god king. When he was still a god king, he already had a record of killing quasi-emperors. At his current level, he didn't know how terrifying he would become once he crossed this line. South Pole Unfettered, I gave you a chance just now, but you didn't take it when I gave you face. Now is the time for you to die, and I have only just begun to exert my strength. Yi Shiwen's indifferent expression became even colder. Don't use your shallow standards to measure me, you will regret it. Yi Shiwen's voice had barely faded when his figure slightly swayed, and instantly disappeared in front of everyone. In the next moment, he had already rushed in front of South Pole Unfettered. 6 Paths of Reincarnation Fist. Yi Shiwen blasted out a punch, and the 6 paths of heaven and earth immediately began to revolve, and twisted into the power of 6 paths of reincarnation, and directly bombarded towards South Pole Unfettered. South Pole Unfettered already felt an astonishing pressure crushing down on him before Yi Shiwen's fist had even landed, and his expression suddenly became incomparably sinister. How can he be so powerful? Let's go all out! South Pole Unfettered shouted, and the ice characters on his body directly flew out and enveloped him, and evolved into a world of ice crystals, which thoroughly froze the space. It was simply a combination of attack and defense. However, it was a pity that he had run into Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen's fist was extraordinarily powerful, and had bombarded his ice crystal world in an instant and shattered it on the spot. The fist continued to penetrate and bombarded South Pole Unfettered's body. Puff, puff, puff. Many mouthfuls of blood spurted out, and South Pole Unfettered was instantly sent flying upside down. He had been bombarded, and the defensive divine tools on his body had exploded one after another. They had turned into ashes, and directly entered the reincarnation cycle. Originally, these divine tools had immortal divinity, and couldn't be destroyed under ordinary circumstances. However, they had been completely destroyed at this moment, and one could well imagine how dreadful this fist of his was. South Pole Unfettered's entire body flew upside down, and directly crashed into a huge star, and smashed the entire star into two halves. A mouthful of old blood spurted out everywhere, and he had suffered serious injuries in an instant. One punch, that's all. Many people simply suspected that there was something wrong with their eyes. For someone as powerful as South Pole Unfettered, he had actually suffered serious injuries with just a mere punch from Yi Shiwen. So, how strong was he now? It's hard for a lion to compete with him. Many veteran quasi-emperors trembled all over as they saw this scene, and let out such a sigh. Such a person simply couldn't compete with him. It was simply unimaginable. These seniors rarely encountered such a situation, because cultivation was all about gradual progress, and such a huge leap was simply not an ordinary situation. "Is this all you've got? I'm so disappointed," Yi Shiwen said with a look of pity on his face. South Pole Unfettered was so angry that he directly spurted out a mouthful of old blood. "You can't bully people like this." Yi Shiwen wasn't lying. He only felt that his entire body was surging with formidable power, and he wanted to practice his skills, but he didn't expect that South Pole Unfettered's strength was far worse than his. Originally, he had to rely on the time robe to contend with South Pole Unfettered, but now Yi Shiwen could blow him up with his bare hands. It was no longer a contest on the same level. This was the power brought about by leaping into the quasi-emperor realm. Of course, that was not all. Although the heavenly tribulation this time was extremely dangerous and he had almost died from it, there were many benefits as well. His synchronization with the time robe had reached a higher level, and they were more compatible with each other. His cultivation had even rushed to the peak of the early quasi-emperor realm in a single breath. Such a speed was simply shocking. However, he felt that it was very normal. Of course, in this world, the greater the reward, the greater the effort. For the sake of crossing the heavenly tribulation this time, it could be said that he had narrowly escaped death, and was besieged by so many peerless powerhouses. If there was no generous reward, how could it be possible? He felt that he had already faintly touched the threshold of the intermediate quasi-emperor realm. This heavenly tribulation had left him with a narrow escape, but it had also directly saved him many years of bitter cultivation. It could be considered as a blessing in disguise, a blessing in disguise. When crossing the heavenly tribulation, he had absorbed too much of the energy of the heavenly tribulation, and now it had completely transformed into his martial power. With only this level of power, you dare to interfere in the heavenly tribulation of others? You really don't know how to write the word death. Yi Shiwen sighed. He did not intend to continue to delay. On one side, the Avicii sword was thoroughly impatient. In order to delay this emperor corpse, its origin was still burning, and every minute was fatal. Seeing that Yi Shiwen had crossed the heavenly tribulation, it became even more impatient. Antarctic loose practitioner's face flushed red when he heard Yi Shiwen's words. Overestimating one's capabilities, there was actually a time when someone said that he was overestimating one's capabilities. This was simply impossible and unbelievable. With his strength, who would dare to talk to him like this? "You're going too far." South Pole Unfettered clenched his teeth. The ice character on top of his head suddenly flew into his body. Immediately after, an extremely painful expression appeared on his face. It was as if an extremely powerful force had erupted inside his body. It blossomed as if it had exploded inside his body. Boom! The aura on his body exploded, freezing the entire world, and instantly rushed towards Yi Shiwen to kill him. Yi Shiwen was planning to meet the attack, but suddenly saw that Antarctic Loose Practitioner was not rushing in his direction, but in the direction of Hua Menghan. Unexpectedly, Antarctic Loose Practitioner intended to break through Hua Menghan's body and escape to the sky. Audacious, courting death. Yi Shiwen's eyes suddenly erupted with a terrible killing intention. His fingertips burst out with sword ki and instantly rose against the wind. The sword ki soared into the sky and instantly chopped down like an ancient mountain. Ah! Antarctic Loose Practitioner did not have enough time to dodge, and was directly chopped into two halves by the sword ki. Chapter 2842. Yi Shiwen's sword light soared into the sky with unimaginably powerful might. Antarctic Loose Cultivator, a late-stage quasi-emperor, couldn't resist such a sword attack and was split into two halves on the spot. Antarctic Loose Cultivator screamed and reconstructed his body in a distant place. He stared at Yi Shiwen with a cold expression. His expression was gloomy and uncertain. Yi Shiwen's strength was completely beyond his expectations. He had just crossed the heavenly tribulation and he was already so powerful. If he were to continue like this, then the consequences would be dire. This time, the karma they had sown was not some small karma, but someone else's heavenly tribulation. For an expert, this was the biggest thing in the world and absolutely could not be forgiven. I think you're really tired of living. Yi Shiwen's originally calm and tranquil expression finally revealed a bit of an expression. It was an expression of anger. If Antarctic Loose Cultivator had attacked him, then he wouldn't have any emotions. But he had deliberately targeted Hua Menghan. This was tantamount to touching the reverse scale of his heart. Yi Shiwen took a step forward and directly crossed the void of the universe, directly rushing in front of Antarctic Loose Cultivator. He launched a simple punch, and the fist strength of his whole body was like a white rainbow piercing through the sky. It seemed as if he had penetrated the entire universe and was trying to break free from it. Behind him, the wheel of the 6 paths of reincarnation appeared. It spun continuously, unleashing boundless power of the 6 paths of reincarnation. It represented the great Tao of reincarnation in the world. Everything was within the cycle of karma. It had to be said that the Azura Demon King was indeed a heavenly genius. He was able to integrate the reincarnation of heaven and earth into his fist technique and form his own system. This was simply not something an ordinary person could do. Wherever Yi Shiwen's fist light passed, the cold energy on Antarctic Loose Cultivator's body collapsed and melted away cleanly as if it had encountered the scorching sun. The fist light suppressed and trembled in all directions. A burst of cold light burst out from Antarctic Loose Cultivator's eyes. He was not a kind person. He had been forced into a corner by Yi Shiwen, so he had no intention of holding back. In front of him, the ice character talisman was constantly flickering with a powerful light. Then, everyone could only see that the ice character talisman was actually burning. South Pole Unfettered, who had been forced to the extreme, had simply burned the ice character talisman that he had originally regarded as his own life. The powerful energy he had obtained from the burning talisman had caused his entire body to swell. He had grown to a height of more than 30 feet like a small mountain. His entire body was emitting a dazzling light of ice crystals. Countless chilly auras pressed down like tiny swords, cutting apart the entire world. It won't be that easy to kill me. South Pole Loose Practitioner's fist blasted out and collided with Yi Shiwen's 6 paths of reincarnation fist. Boom! Space collapsed everywhere, and all the power was absorbed by the primal chaos after the collapsed space. It should be said that it was like a tsunami pouring in, stirring up the entire primal chaos and making it tremble. This power was terrifyingly strong. After South Pole Unfettered had burned the ice character talisman, his strength had increased by many times. He was like the Ice King of the ancient times. In the universe, countless ice-attributed energy condensed towards his body, causing the aura chi around his body to become more intense, and his clothes to flutter in the wind. Yi Shiwen, you have forced me to this point. Today will be the day of your death. I will make you understand what kind of existence you have provoked. South Pole Unfettered's voice was incomparably cold. It seemed as if he had just been fished out of an icehouse, and everyone could feel a chill running down their spine. What? South Pole Unfettered is burning the ice character talisman. Almost everyone felt that it was a pity. In order to defeat Yi Shiwen, he is going all out. But why bother? If he did not get involved in this mess, he would not have been forced to burn his natal ice character talisman. After this battle, if he can survive, the losses will be enough for him to cultivate for millions of years. Who would have thought that Yi Shiwen would become so strong after crossing the heavenly retribution tribulation, and even forced a dignified late-stage quasi-emperor expert to a dead end? If South Pole Unfettered had thought of this earlier, he would not have intervened. Alas, he has been blinded by greed. Now he has gone for wool and come home shorn. He has suffered a double loss. Yes, who would have thought that this battle would turn out like this? The heroes who tried to stop him from crossing the heavenly retribution tribulation have obviously failed. After crossing the quasi-emperor retribution tribulation, it will be even more difficult for Yi Shiwen to stop him. That is because he is stupid. Except for the celestial race, everyone knew that he had hidden his identity, and he dared to come here with his real body. Isn't he courting death? Even if he really killed Yi Shiwen also has many powerful friends in this world. How can he let him go? Everyone was talking at once. This time, the biggest suspense of the heavenly retribution tribulation had been settled. Yi Shiwen had survived the terrifying heavenly retribution unscathed. Now it was time to see how far he could go. Looking at Yi Shiwen's appearance, it was obvious that he would not let these people go easily. Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes and looked at South Pole Unfettered, who was becoming more and more powerful. He opened his heavenly eye and saw through him. This kind of ancient character, whether it was formed innately or condensed by people, in addition to the hidden information of the Great Way, it also contained endless energy. Many of these ancient characters were formed by the power and the purest understanding of the Great Way of the fallen powerhouses. Once released, there was no need to mention its power, it was simply terrifying. Not to mention that this ice character charm was formed innately and contained innate energy. Only innate energy could increase the strength of a late-stage quasi-emperor expert to another level. However, the consequences of doing so were naturally very obvious. Once the ice character talisman was burned, it would harm the origin of the great ways within it. Not to mention the consumption of his own great ways, just nurturing the ice character talisman to its peak would take an unknown number of years. This was not an ordinary loss. At this moment, South Pole Unfettered seemed to have become the Ice Emperor, the only overlord of this world. His entire body was covered with a layer of ice crystal radiance, forming an ice robe. It was condensed from countless ice attribute principles. It was pure and terrifying, and could make people tremble in fear from afar. Die for me. An ice blade appeared in South Pole Unfettered's hand, and he directly thrust it towards Yi Shiwen's face, wanting to hack him to death on the spot. Yi Shiwen had thoroughly infuriated him. If he could not kill Yi Shiwen, he would not be able to die in peace. Ice character charm, huh? Yi Shiwen looked at the ice character charm that was constantly emitting a rainbow light above South Pole Unfettered's head. He was facing the incoming ice blade without the slightest bit of fear, and directly reached out to grab it. His big hand swept out, blotting out the sky and the sun, as if it contained the entire world within it. See if I don't chop off your hand. You dare to take my ice blade with your bare hands! South Pole Unfettered shouted angrily. His breathing was like thunder, and the sound of his breathing was like the sound of raging waves beating against the shore. Clang! An intense and crisp sound of collision resounded. Everyone only saw an astonishing collision between the two sides. Yi Shiwen had actually taken South Pole Unfettered's ice blade with his bare hands. There was not the slightest trace of abnormality in his palm. It was not frozen and then chopped off. This, his physical cultivation, is simply heaven-defying. He is taking the principles with his bare hands. Many people sucked in a mouthful of cold air. Yi Shiwen had displayed an amazing resistance since he had crossed the tribulation. However, many people believed that he had merely borrowed the power of a Tao tool. Only now did they realize that they had made a mistake. Moreover, it was a very outrageous mistake. How could he borrow the power of a Tao tool? His own strength was also ridiculously strong. Again, South Pole Unfettered's eyes burst open. His blade chopped down towards Yi Shiwen again. The blade chi transformed into a divine dragon that blotted out the sky and pounced towards Yi Shiwen to kill him. This blade seemed like a lightning tearing the curtain of the night and bringing light to the world. It's useless no matter how many times you try, Yi Shiwen sneered. He used his hand to block the blade again. A chip appeared on the ice blade, but he himself didn't suffer any injury. You've cultivated for so many years, but you're still a waste. Your strength hasn't improved much even after burning the ice character charm. Instead of letting the ice character charm fall into your hands, it would be a waste to cast pearls before swine. Dominate the world, Yi Shiwen shouted loudly. His voice was like a long spear and it soared into the sky. It was unknown how much power it had dispersed. His big hand grabbed towards the void, and the law of sword condensed into a long sword. His body seemed to have put on an imperial robe in a split second, and he had turned into a great emperor who dominated the world. The sword light in his hand grew bigger and bigger, and it directly pierced through the sky. It was like an ancient divine mountain, and it exuded a dazzling and terrifying light between the heaven and the earth. Chop it for me. Yi Shiwen waved his hand, and the sword light chopped down on the spot. It carried boundless power, and suppressed South Pole Unfettered's head. South Pole Unfettered immediately felt the terror of this sword. The moment this sword chopped down, the ice crystal armor on his body suddenly collapsed on the spot. Crackling sounds rang incessantly. The defense that he was so proud of couldn't even resist the pressure of Yi Shiwen's sword momentum. Impossible, how can he be so strong? Impossible, South Pole Unfettered roared in disbelief. He spouted a mouthful of blood, and it burned in the void. It integrated into his body, and unexpectedly became a bit stronger. I'll fight you to the death, South Pole Unfettered roared. An ice blade appeared in his hand, and he directly chopped towards Yi Shiwen. He wanted to exchange blows with Yi Shiwen. Bang! The saber energy and the sword light directly collided, and set off an astonishing confrontation. Saber and sword, ice and fire, it was hard to imagine. Buzz! All of a sudden, the saber chi shattered. Chapter 28:43. The stalemate between the sword and the blade only lasted for a moment. Then, the blade light couldn't withstand the pressure of Yi Shiwen's sword momentum and broke cleanly on the spot. The strength of Yi Shiwen's sword momentum could be seen at a glance. It was simply not something an ordinary person could compare with. One more blade. South Pole Loose Practitioner wasn't willing to accept defeat. So, he once again chopped out with his blade. This time, he was burning his own life source. Under the pressure of Yi Shiwen's formidable sword momentum, each blade chopping out required an inexhaustible amount of energy. So, even if he burned the ice character charm, it was impossible for him to display his true strength endlessly. It's useless. It's the same no matter how many blades you use. Don't you understand the disparity between you and me? Yi Shiwen's voice was cold and ruthless. It was as if he was killing an ant. Bang! Sure enough, Antarctic Loose Cultivator's blade light collapsed the moment it came into contact with Yi Shiwen's sword momentum. Clang! Antarctic Loose Cultivator once again slashed out to meet Yi Shiwen's blade light. He wanted to use the wheel tactic to defeat Yi Shiwen's sword momentum. However, Yi Shiwen's sword momentum was like a reef facing the sea waves. No matter how many blade light there was no way to defeat him. Although all of this took a long time to describe, it actually happened in the blink of an eye. It was just that the speed at which both sides attacked was too fast. In an instant, they had already exchanged hundreds of blows and clashed countless times. Finally, Yi Shiwen's sword momentum fell and directly exploded on Antarctic Loose Cultivator's body. Bang! The ice crystal armor on Antarctic Loose Cultivator's body also collapsed into ice crystal fragments in a flash. Then, the blade light directly slashed into Antarctic Loose Cultivator's body. Poochie! Blood instantly splashed out. Yi Shiwen's sword momentum was the sharpest sword. It had unexpectedly split Antarctic Loose Cultivator into two halves. Everyone only saw Antarctic Loose Cultivator's hill-like body being split into two halves on the spot. There was simply no way for him to resist, and his body exploded on the spot. Ah! A blood-curdling scream was heard. Everyone only saw Yi Shiwen directly stretch out his big hand and directly grab Antarctic Loose Cultivator's body. Then, he directly grabbed the ice charm that had fused with him on the spot. Blood spurted out crazily, dyeing the sky red. The ice character talisman was still struggling in his hand, but was quickly suppressed by him. Even South Pole Loose Practitioner wasn't his match, let alone an ancient character talisman. The two halves of South Pole's Loose Cultivator's body were still fleeing towards the depths of the cosmic void. Without the ice character charm, it was even more impossible for him to confront Yi Shiwen. How could this be? It ended too quickly. In the distance, many quasi-emperors were suffocated and almost fainted from fright. This was simply unbelievable. After this, South Pole Loose Cultivator used the ice character talisman. His strength is above mine. How could he be split into two halves by a single sword strike? An old quasi-emperor roared hysterically in his heart. He thought that his eyes were playing tricks on him. Yi Shiwen's strength was simply unimaginable. You want to leave? How could it be so easy? Stay here for me. Yi Shiwen chopped down his sword while suppressing that ice character charm. He chopped out an earth-shattering powerful sword light from high up in the sky. It broke through the space, and directly transformed into an ancient mountain. Then, it ruthlessly chopped down in the direction of the fleeing South Pole Loose Cultivator. Bang! South Pole Loose Cultivator was once again chopped and exploded in the sky. He wasn't so lucky this time. His soul had been repeatedly destroyed by Yi Shiwen, and couldn't condense again. It was useless even if he was a quasi-emperor. In the face of this level of attack, even a quasi-emperor would die. Yi Shiwen didn't even look at South Pole Loose Cultivator after killing him with one sword strike. Instead, he started to refine the ice character charm on the spot. Everyone was dumbfounded. Yi Shiwen was too fierce after crossing the heavenly tribulation. Even South Pole Loose Cultivator couldn't pose too much of a threat to him. In this world, who could stop him? Moreover, what surprised them even more was that the ice character charm didn't struggle for long in Yi Shiwen's hand. It was completely refined by him. This efficiency was so high that it was scary. Yi Shiwen certainly wouldn't have been able to refine it so quickly if it had been in the past. However, his strength had evolved by leaps and bounds now. So, he could easily defeat 7 or 8 of himself at the same time. He couldn't be mentioned in the same breath as before. Moreover, South Pole Loose Cultivator had been killed by him. So, he couldn't control him anymore. Yi Shiwen looked at Hua Menghan after refining that ice character charm. He saw a faint smile on her pretty face. She nodded towards him. She didn't wait for Yi Shiwen to speak, and her figure transformed into a mass of light in the void, and disappeared. She had persisted until now with the help of a wisp of soul power. She had exhausted all her strength. But she finally couldn't hold on any longer, and disappeared without a trace. Only the phoenix robe remained. Then, this phoenix robe transformed into a huge fire phoenix, and flew into the depths of the universe. It flew in the direction of the ancient phoenix world. The phoenix robe naturally returned to the ancient phoenix world, since no one was controlling it. The phoenix robe has returned. Everyone of the ancient phoenix world heaved a sigh of relief at this time. Even they were a little nervous about leaving the phoenix robe in a place where it wasn't under their control. After all, the phoenix robe would have been damaged in case of a surprise attack by the heavenly race. The consequences would have been simply unimaginable. Fortunately, the worst-case scenario didn't happen. They were also paying attention to Yi Shiwen's tribulation. So, their complexions were even more complicated at this time. It could be said that undercurrents were surging before Yi Shiwen's tribulation. It wasn't known how many people were looking forward to Yi Shiwen's death. There were also many people in the ancient phoenix world who had such thoughts. However, Yi Shiwen was the son-in-law of the ancient phoenix world. So, they couldn't slap their own face like this. However, they wouldn't help either side at most. In their opinion, Yi Shiwen would still die even if they didn't help either side. So, they didn't need to do anything. Later, Hua Menghan had begged them, and made many promises. So, they had finally agreed. However, they hadn't thought that things would change because of this. As far as they knew, the people who wanted to kill Yi Shiwen had already made them think that he would die. Who would have thought that not only would Yi Shiwen forcefully cross the heavenly tribulation, but his strength would also swell to a terrifying level after he had crossed the tribulation. The strength of the ancient phoenix world had been greatly reduced, and it was impossible to say that they could suppress Yi Shiwen if he were to take into account the infinite pain sword and the time robe in his hands. Everyone had an indescribable feeling in their hearts. They were depressed, but they were also a little happy. They were depressed because they didn't like Yi Shiwen. However, Yi Shiwen had become more and more powerful step by step. They were afraid that it wouldn't take long for him to occupy the position of the strongest expert under the Emperor realm if this trend continued. Even the Emperor realm would adopt the method of roping in such a peerless expert instead of suppressing him casually. Even the Emperor realm couldn't provoke the public's anger. There was no need to do so. However, they were happy because Yi Shiwen was the son-in-law of the ancient phoenix world. Moreover, the ancient phoenix world had even helped him this time. They had even dispatched the phoenix robe. It could be said that they were extremely benevolent. Under such circumstances, Yi Shiwen would owe the ancient phoenix world a favor. This could be considered as easing the tense relationship between them. As for the promises that Hua Menghan had made previously, everyone had a tacit understanding not to mention it again. The premise of those promises being fulfilled was that Yi Shiwen would die tragically in the heavens' retribution. However, not only had Yi Shiwen crossed the heavens' retribution, but he had also become so powerful. How could they still be so insensible as to mention such a thing? Weren't they afraid that Yi Shiwen would attack the ancient phoenix world? The ancient phoenix world wasn't so stubborn that they would be so stubborn. They had been tough before because Yi Shiwen didn't have the qualifications to make them give in by a large margin. However, Yi Shiwen did have the qualifications to do so now. This wasn't the first time that the ancient phoenix world had given in to an expert. It wouldn't be the last time either. Even the inheritances of the Emperor realm had to understand that it was impossible to deal with anything forcefully. The next few million years will be his era. I'm afraid that no one in the same generation, or even us old fellows, will be able to deal with him. If there's someone who can contend against the rebellious emperor, it must be him. In the ancient Phoenix world, a veteran quasi-emperor couldn't help but sigh. It was as if the new waves of the Yangtze River had pushed the old waves forward, and the old waves had died on the beach. However, this is also a good thing for now. Now that the heavenly race is very powerful, the heavenly race is the biggest threat to the rise of Yi Shiwen. That's why they would brazenly send so many experts to attack him. They have Dao weapons, emperor corpses, and those quasi-emperors from before. They're really generous. Another old quasi-emperor said. The words of this quasi-emperor made everyone nod in agreement. Indeed, it seemed that the advantages outweighed the disadvantages. At this time, there was another change on the battlefield. After the phoenix robe flew away, Yi Shiwen didn't stop at all. He directly rushed to the other side of the battlefield, directly to the place where Yi Qianqian and the quasi-emperor of the underworld were fighting. Compared to Hua Menghan's precarious situation, Yi Qianqian's side was undoubtedly much better. However, she was still suppressed by the experts of the underworld. In particular, there was a steady stream of Yin soldiers from the underworld pouring in from the cracks in the space. If it weren't for Yi Shiwen's demon-summoning banner, she would have been drowned by these endless Yin soldiers and wouldn't have been able to hold on until Yi Shiwen came out. Sky-flipping seal. Just as the quasi-emperor of the underworld and Yi Qianqian were locked in a fierce battle, a cold voice sounded across the sky. Then, a seal directly fell like an ancient divine mountain. Bang! The seal blasted the infernal palace quasi-emperor on the spot and directly blasted him away. Chapter 2844. The Inferno quasi-emperor had cultivated some kind of body-refining technique, but it was incomparably tyrannical. It could be said that it was not difficult for him to kill all strong enemies with his physical body. Yi Qianqian was barely able to resist it. It was different from Yi Shiwen's masculine and domineering body-refining technique. Both Yi Qianqian and the Inferno quasi-emperor's body-refining technique leaned towards the negative side. It was a little similar to the physique of zombies, but there were also differences. Judging from the origin of the Inferno, it was very likely that it was a supreme body-refining technique that was created by drawing on some of the physique characteristics of zombies. It could be said to be incomparably powerful. However, it was blasted away by the sky-flipping seal, and cracks appeared on its incomparably sturdy body. It was completely horrified that it was severely injured in one blow. Yi Shiwen's figure slowly appeared in front of Yi Qianqian. In his ears there were cries of killing everywhere. The many demon kings in the demon flag, and the Inferno's ghost soldiers, were directly engaged in battle. There were exploded corpses everywhere. The battle was incomparably fierce. The original spirits of the many demon kings without a physical body were slightly weaker. Even though they later condensed a physical body through the spirit sculpting technique, this kind of spirit body could not compare to the tyrannical body of the Inferno's ghost soldiers. In the myriad heavens and myriad worlds, it was rare for a spirit body to be cultivated to an incomparably domineering level. Compared to other physiques, it was undoubtedly much rarer. However, the number of demon kings far exceeded the number of Inferno's ghost soldiers. In this way, they actually had the upper hand. The Inferno quasi-emperor could not spare his full strength to deal with Yi Qianqian. They held on until Yi Shiwen could free his hands. The Inferno quasi-emperor looked coldly at Yi Shiwen, his green eyes like two balls of will-o-wisp. A little interesting. I didn't expect that even the legendary Inferno would interfere in my tribulation. Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes and said coldly, Yi Shiwen, this is our family affair. I hope you don't interfere in the internal affairs of the Inferno. Otherwise, the Inferno quasi-emperor said coldly, otherwise I would be going against the underworld, right? Yi Shiwen laughed and continued to say, so what if we go against the underworld? The demon emperor is right. They are just a bunch of rats hiding in the dark and don't dare to come out. Yi Shiwen's harsh words made the Quasi-Emperor tremble with anger. He gritted his teeth and said, "How dare you blaspheme death? Desecration of death? Do you think we can't tell who is the one desecrating death? Isn't it blasphemous to refine the corpses of those who died in battle?" Yi Shiwen's voice shook the world. Many people secretly applauded in their hearts. Although the underworld was powerful and unrivaled, many people were also very disapproving of their actions. It was not without reason that the demon emperor had called him a clown. Moreover, many of the ghost soldiers of the Inferno were their predecessors. After their corpses were collected, they were refined into ghost soldiers to fight for the Inferno. This was a great shame to them. If it wasn't for the fact that the Inferno was too mysterious, it was impossible to find its lair, and it was ridiculously powerful. Back then, even the Azura Demon King couldn't break through it. Otherwise, it would have been destroyed long ago. How dare you go against the Inferno? I think you've been too successful, so you think you're infallible. The Inferno Quasi-Emperor looked at Yi Shiwen coldly. There was an unimaginable coldness in his eyes. With just you. Yi Shiwen sneered and instantly took a step forward. When he reappeared, he was already in front of the Inferno Quasi-Emperor. He had directly transcended time and space. He had transcended everything. Bang! The Inferno Quasi-Emperor was hit by Yi Shiwen's fist again and was sent flying. Puff! The Inferno Quasi-Emperor spat out a mouthful of blood. He had been seriously injured in one blow. So strong! At this point, even the Inferno Quasi-Emperor had to admit that Yi Shiwen seemed to be very strong. In fact, he was terrifyingly strong. If he hadn't defended in time just now, most of his body would have been smashed into pieces. Even with the strength of his physical body, he was still so passive. One could imagine that an ordinary person would have died if they had encountered him. He didn't pay too much attention to South Pole Loose Cultivator's situation just now. He only guessed that South Pole Loose Cultivator should have been killed by Yi Shiwen. However, he never imagined that Yi Shiwen could be so tyrannical. Is the Inferno only at this level? Yi Shiwen said coldly. His whole body was exuding a kind of terrifying light. The heavens and the universe were frozen by him alone. There was no wind and no waves. His will was the will of heaven and earth. Yi Shiwen, don't look down on the Inferno! The Inferno Quasi-Emperor shouted and let out a long and loud roar. His voice seemed to have been transmitted from ancient times. It was everlasting and had a long history. That terrifying power surged in the void, and endless death energy condensed in his hand, forming a death scythe that chopped down towards Yi Shiwen. Bang! There was a loud roar. This death scythe cut everything, completely smashing the stars in the sky. The blood-red blade directly slashed in front of Yi Shiwen. It directly cut his whole body in half. However, the void trembled and Yi Shiwen returned to normal. Not good! The Inferno Quasi-Emperor suddenly cursed in his heart. He actually failed to kill Yi Shiwen. He couldn't even cut through the space around him, let alone injure his body. With the might of his death scythe, any kind of solid space would be slashed open. However, Yi Shiwen didn't. So, he either had some kind of transcendent spatial divine tool on him, or his understanding of space had reached a shocking level. No matter which one it was very difficult to deal with. Especially the latter, it made him want to give up. Whoosh! Just at this moment when he hesitated, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. He saw Yi Shiwen directly slapping a praying mat with his big hand. Bang! His whole head was slapped and instantly flew out. His whole head directly exploded, blood splattered everywhere and bone fragments flew everywhere. His whole body flew out like a meteor and crashed into a planet. It was unknown how many stars were shattered. Strong. Absolutely strong. The Quasi-Emperors who were watching from afar sucked in a breath of cold air. Compared to the time when he fought with South Pole Loose Cultivator, the current Yi Shiwen was much more powerful and terrifying. They could clearly feel that Yi Shiwen was able to control his own strength more easily than when he fought with South Pole Loose Cultivator. In terms of strength, this Inferno Quasi-Emperor was stronger than South Pole Loose Cultivator. He also had the supreme inheritance of the Inferno. How could South Pole Loose Cultivator be compared to him? It could be said that he was on a higher level, but when facing Yi Shiwen, he was even more embarrassed. South Pole Loose Cultivator could still resist for a while, but this Inferno Quasi-Emperor was completely taught a lesson. It was not that he had become weaker, but Yi Shiwen had become stronger. The aura on his body was getting stronger every minute and second, becoming more terrifying. In the face of such a strong Yi Shiwen, even those quasi-emperors who had never opposed Yi Shiwen felt terrified. When a person was too strong, it would form an invisible deterrent to others. Not to mention those quasi-emperors who had ulterior motives were almost scared to death. The stronger Yi Shiwen was, the higher the possibility of his revenge, and the more difficult it would be for them to deal with him. Based on Yi Shiwen's current strength, I'm afraid that only the Great Freedom Heaven, Fire Dragon Immortal and the others can firmly suppress him. The other late-stage quasi-emperors may not be his opponent. He has just crossed Heaven's retribution and he is already so strong. If this continues, how terrible will it be? Sigh, he is so strong. I don't know whether it is a blessing or a curse for our allied forces. Based on his temper, how can he not take revenge? When the time comes, will we have to cause internal strife first? Wouldn't that be a joke to the celestial race? Many quasi-emperors were worried. Yi Shiwen's strength was originally a good thing to a certain extent. It could give him a greater advantage against the celestial race. Experts who had reached their level could already cause a fundamental change in a certain battle. But now many people were secretly reaching out to Yi Shiwen. This might cause internal strife before they could deal a blow to the celestial race. So what if I look down on you? Yi Shiwen said coldly. In the distance, the head of the Inferno Quasi-Emperor regrew. His complexion was extremely ugly. He had been seriously injured in succession, and his origin was directly injured. He didn't know how long he would need to recuperate, but at this time there was clearly no other way. He roared, and all the death energy around him gathered into his body. The aura of his body had increased by a whole level. This was his secret technique. He could increase his strength in one go. After fusing with the martial arts incarnation, his strength had increased by a lot in one go. Yi Shiwen? The Inferno Quasi-Emperor roared, looking up to the sky. But before he finished speaking, he saw Yi Shiwen's big hand directly penetrate through his body, directly penetrating the death energy that protected his body. His originally incomparably powerful body protection of death energy did not even have the slightest reaction. It was like brine hitting tofu, directly cutting through it. Then, a palm slapped toward him. The Inferno Quasi-Emperor could clearly see the hand slapping toward him, but his body could not make any reaction at all. It was as if he was a little white rabbit frightened by the aura of a fierce tiger. He could only watch as the hand slapped toward him on the spot. Boom! He was directly slapped away. The aura that had just condensed did not have time to erupt at all. It was directly slapped away, turning into black stars that swept in all directions. And his whole body was sent flying. Chapter 2845. The Quasi-Emperor of the Underworld had yet to fully organize his attack before it was smashed and stopped abruptly. Such a strong attack directly stunned the Quasi-Emperor of the Underworld. It was not that he had never seen a strong master before, but it was unprecedented for someone to be this strong, almost playing him like a monkey. It was simply an extreme humiliation. Ah! He let out a loud roar. Yi Shiwen, how dare you trick me? Yes, I did. So what? Yi Shiwen's expression was cold, but his heart was actually as clear as a mirror. Although he did not know what kind of inheritance Yi Qianqian had received during this period of time, her strength had actually improved by leaps and bounds in such a short period of time. But it must be related to the underworld. Of course, he would help his wife. No matter what kind of expert was behind the underworld, it did not matter to him. Even if it was the inheritance of an emperor, there was nothing to be afraid of. The quasi-emperor of the underworld roared continuously, feeling that his self-esteem had been trampled. The quasi-emperor of the underworld opened his mouth and instantly spat out a Styx river. This Styx river was completely composed of yellow spring water. In an instant, it evolved into a vast sea that filled the sky and rushed towards Yi Shiwen. Wherever this Styx river passed, the heavens and the earth collapsed. It was not something that ordinary space could contain. It could strongly corrode space. Once the water volume increased, it could penetrate the entire space. Moreover, this was a Styx river that had been specially refined. It was impossible for ordinary people to have so much yellow spring water, let alone to refine it into a Styx river. Only in a world where the dead gathered like the underworld could it be done. This Styx river instantly pierced through the void and shot towards Yi Shiwen, wanting to directly corrode him. But then something happened that made the expert of the underworld a little suffocated. He saw that Yi Shiwen was not worried about this Styx river at all. Instead, he walked directly on the Styx river. The yellow spring water in the Styx river could do nothing to Yi Shiwen. He walked directly on the yellow spring water, like a legendary venerable, walking in the worst environment without the slightest change. Is that all? Yi Shiwen laughed heartily. He pressed his fingers together, and boundless sword light burst out from his fingertips. It immediately formed a long river formed from sword Dao talismans, and then it blasted down towards the powerhouse of the inferno. That underworld expert hurriedly dodged, but there was no way for him to dodge. Yi Shiwen's powerful aura had completely locked him in place. "I'll fight you to the death." When the inferno powerhouse saw that he couldn't dodge, he couldn't help but be shocked and extremely angry. He immediately let out a loud roar, and the death scythe in his hand erupted with an astonishing light on the spot, piercing towards Yi Shiwen. Boom! Yi Shiwen's sword light directly chopped down. His counterattack was of no use at all. He was directly chopped into pieces by Yi Shiwen's sword light. Ah! He let out a blood-curdling scream as he was cut into two halves by the sword ray. The figure that had been cut in half immediately fled into the distance. At this time, he no longer dared to confront Yi Shiwen head-on. He finally understood that the gap between him and Yi Shiwen couldn't be calculated with logic. They weren't on the same level at all. If this continued, he would really die. Humph, trying to escape? Yi Shiwen sneered and slashed down with his sword again. However, at this time, the death aura of the entire universe seemed to condense together, forming a huge hand that grabbed towards the Inferno Emperor, trying to save him. A crack directly appeared in the void, and the huge hand came from that crack. It was the same aura as the Inferno Emperor. The top experts of the Inferno have intervened. Yi Shiwen instantly reacted, but it was only for a moment. He immediately counterattacked. Clang! The sword light directly chopped down on the spot, cutting the sky into two halves. It directly slashed down towards the Inferno Emperor. "How dare you!" A shocked and angry voice came from that crack. He didn't expect that Yi Shiwen would still dare to attack under such circumstances. He simply didn't take them seriously at all. At this time, he was extremely angry. Yi Shiwen didn't say anything and directly slashed down with his sword. Boom! The Inferno Emperor didn't have time to react at all and was killed on the spot. His body and soul were completely destroyed, leaving nothing behind. "How dare you kill the people of the Inferno?" An extremely gloomy and angry roar came from the crack. "Yi Shiwen, I originally thought that you were a genius and wanted to make you into my proudest collection. But now, it seems that you have brought about your own destruction." proudest collection? A sharp light flashed in Yi Shiwen's eyes, and endless killing intent erupted. The Inferno actually coveted his body in secret and wanted to refine him into a ghost soldier. This was simply courting death. At this time, a lot of records about the Inferno flashed in his mind. In the long river of history there were many brilliant geniuses. Some survived until the end and became invincible great figures who were famous in the world. There were also some who died tragically, and in the end, they couldn't even cause a ripple. However, there were also some who disappeared inexplicably. Some records in the ancient books seemed to be related to the people of the Inferno. It seemed that the people of the Inferno had finally reached out and finally caused these people to disappear. Thinking back to the words of the Demon Emperor, the Inferno seemed to have a big plan and was recruiting experts everywhere. The Demon Emperor should have rejected the recruitment of the Inferno. With the strength and status of the Demon Emperor, the Inferno wanting to recruit the Demon Emperor was tantamount to courting death. It was simply impossible. From this, it could be seen how arrogant the Inferno was. They actually dared to covet a peerless figure like the Demon Emperor. Moreover, it seemed that they didn't start coveting after their death, but they had looked for the Demon Emperor when they were alive. Although the arrogant guy was finally killed by the Demon Emperor Bell, the conspiracy of the Inferno had never disappeared. In the past, he probably hadn't caught the attention of the Inferno, but now that he had survived the heavenly tribulation, he had probably caught the attention of the Inferno. The crack was getting smaller and smaller. Even a quasi-emperor would find it difficult to maintain this crack, which required a huge amount of magic power. It wasn't a long-term solution. Suddenly, Yi Shiwen made his move at this moment. He casually grabbed a long sword that was condensed from sword intent. The sword was overflowing with brilliance, and it was directly covered with the power of time. Then, he used the power of the time robe to throw it into the void on the spot. Swish! The sword light cut through the sky and was sent into the void crack in an instant. It was like a meteor streaking across the sky and exploded violently. Rumble! A huge explosion sounded and the sword will of the ruler of time, that was covered with the power of time, exploded on the spot. It was like a nuclear bomb had exploded and the entire crack was blown to pieces. It even seemed to have injured the great expert on the other side of the crack. Only a series of screams and angry roars could be heard from inside. Yi Shiwen, the Inferno will not let you off. You will be in great trouble. Many people suddenly sucked in a breath of cold air. This Yi Shiwen was simply too audacious. The other side of the crack was the underworld, which represented the most ominous existence in the world. However, he didn't care about it and even dared to attack. When the other side was about to retreat, he still attacked the other side. This was completely shedding all pretense of cordiality. At the same time, everyone had a deep understanding of Yi Shiwen's vengeance. Those who provoked him, even the legendary Inferno, would have to pay a heavy price. He wouldn't let them off so easily. But they didn't know that for Yi Shiwen, it didn't matter at all. The other side wanted to plot against him, and with Yi Shiwen's temper, how could he let it go? He would definitely get back at them. Not to mention, if necessary, he would help Yi Qianqian kill her way back to the Inferno and take back everything for her. He could vaguely guess that all this was probably related to the competition for inheritance. Yi Qianqian's inheritance was obviously of the same origin as the Inferno, but they were incompatible with each other. So, it wasn't difficult to guess the whole story. It was just that he didn't know the specific details. Moreover, the infernal world was different from the original devil race and other forces that were out in the open. The infernal world had hidden itself too deeply. Yi Shiwen wouldn't feel at ease if he couldn't eradicate them. They had been eyeing him from the moment they had set their sights on him. They wouldn't rest until one of them had fallen. Will the Inferno really come out because of Yi Shiwen's matter? An old quasi-emperor couldn't help but feel a chill at the soles of his feet. The Inferno's power was hidden too deeply. No one knew how many tentacles they had extended into the heavens. Originally, when there was no celestial race, the Inferno was a thorn in the hearts of the major forces. The dead and the living were naturally opposed. Once the Inferno completely came out of the mountain, it would probably cause another great earthquake. It's impossible. Based on the style of the Inferno, it's most likely that they would constantly assassinate Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen has provoked a peerless enemy. Yes, forget about the others, the Inferno is too strong. In the Inferno, who knows how many tyrannical powerhouses in the past have been refined into ghost soldiers by them. I'm afraid there are also many quasi-emperor level powerhouses. Can Yi Shiwen always be on guard? This Yi Shiwen's tribulation has drawn out how many people behind the scenes. Even a hidden force like the Inferno may be forced to come out. This time the heavens will be even more chaotic. Before Yi Shiwen had time to speak to Yi Chanqian, the roar of the Avicii sword came to his ears. Boy, you've solved the problem. Hurry up and help me. Yi Shiwen didn't dare to delay. The Emperor's source on his body began to burn, and the time robe instantly erupted with dazzling light. Chapter 2846. The power of time was spreading all over Yi Shiwen's body. His aura was changing, and it became many times more terrifying. His eyes were shining brightly. The next battle would not be a small one. It would be a battle with the Dao Tool and the Emperor's corpse. Such a level of teaching was not something he could reach now. He could only do it with the help of the time robe. It was already infinitely close to the legendary Emperor-level battle. Sword of Domination. Yi Shiwen attacked ruthlessly. In an instant, his whole person became many times more terrifying. A sword aura slashed out. It was like an ancient mountain slashing down, causing the sky to shake. Everything was pierced, and the entire universe was instantly penetrated. Compared to before, it was more than 10 times more powerful. Only then did everyone realize that Yi Shiwen had hidden such a trump card, which he had not used at all. Yi Shiwen, who was wearing the time robe, was naturally qualified to participate in a battle of this level. For them, this was also dazzling, especially the power of time that swept out from the time robe. For them, it was also a mysterious domain. Especially for quasi-emperor divine kings, they needed more time to study space and time. The study of space and time was also a part of the origin and essence of the universe. Naturally, it could greatly improve their strength. However, compared to space, the power of time was mysterious and unfathomable. Under normal circumstances, it was impossible to figure it out, let alone materialize it in front of everyone. This was also an excellent opportunity. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Yi Shiwen, trying to comprehend the great way of time. This time, no one dared to look down on him anymore. If he had only been a god king before, then his endurance had been quite limited. But now that his cultivation had advanced, his fighting time had been greatly extended. Compared to before, it was unknown how many times stronger he was. Yi Shiwen's sword light pierced through, and instantly swept out hundreds of millions of rays of brilliance. The entire universe was crowded, and only this immortal spirit was left in the entire universe. It directly blasted in the direction of the Emperor's corpse. The most terrifying energy storm erupted, causing the entire universe to tremble. Ah! Emperor Enai, who was in the Emperor's corpse, also discovered Yi Shiwen's attack. All of his energy was focused on the sword of Avicii, and he did not dare to be distracted. Otherwise, he would be killed even in the Emperor's corpse. The Avicii sword was simply too powerful. This time, his expression finally changed. Everything had happened so quickly. He had thought that Yi Shiwen, who had been continuously disturbed, would not be able to successfully cross the tribulation. If he had been in Yi Shiwen's shoes, the probability of his death would have been very high. Now, not only had Yi Shiwen crossed the heavenly tribulation, but he had also appeared in an unscathed state, which made his heart stop beating all of a sudden. Damn it! The Emperor's corpse raised its hand and grabbed at the sword. Boom! The peerless collision erupted in an instant. The sword aura and the giant hand collided on the spot, annihilating time and space. The terrifying power of both sides directly collided. Yi Shiwen's sword light directly broke into the body of the Emperor's corpse. This was a fatal blow. D&I had been too careless. The Emperor corpse was invincible, and only a Dao artifact could injure it. It was much stronger than any Dharma artifact. However, Yi Shiwen still had the time magic robe even though he didn't have the infinite pain sword in his hand. The might of the time magic robe was tyrannical to an unimaginable extent. Puff! The Emperor's corpse spurted a mouthful of blood, and his whole body flew out. His whole arm exploded on the spot, turning into a blood mist that scattered all over the sky. Everyone was stunned. Was the Emperor's corpse really going to be killed today? In the face of 2 or more Dharma artifacts at full strength, even the Emperor's corpse would have to suffer. After all, the Emperor's corpse was not a real emperor. The infinite pain sword was fully awakened. It was already tyrannical to the extreme. Yi Shiwen attacked with the full strength of the peak late quasi-emperor. Compared to before, when the Golden Dragon King, who was at the level of the 10 great divine kings, activated the ancestral dragon seal, the power was incomparable. At that time, the ancestral dragon seal could barely hold the Emperor's corpse, but Yi Shiwen could seriously injure him with one blow. Just when everyone was still immersed in the amazing power of this attack, the world suddenly shook violently. Yi Shiwen attacked again. He was like a rock pouncing on the Emperor's corpse. If it was an ordinary quasi-emperor, Yi Shiwen's attack was enough to kill his whole body and spirit. However, the Emperor's corpse only lost an arm. It was obvious who was strong and who was weak. Therefore, Yi Shiwen's attack was just the beginning. Without backup, the Inverse Emperor could not afford to drag on, but Yi Shiwen could not afford to. Every second that he burned the Emperor's source made him feel distressed. He had to end the battle quickly. Yi Shiwen's left hand turned into the overturning sky seal, and the ruler's sword appeared in his right hand. He directly slashed down. It broke through the universe and hit the Emperor's corpse again. Bang! The Emperor's corpse, who was flying backward, suffered a heavy blow. Its whole body was split on the spot, and a huge blood mist burst out. On the other side, the infinite pain sword also attacked at lightning speed. It directly slashed out a bloodlight, which directly penetrated the broken Emperor's corpse and directly slashed in the direction of the Inverse Emperor. It wanted to kill the culprit on the spot. This series of attacks had simply reached the pinnacle of speed and violence. It was simply not something that an ordinary person could imagine. Rumble! Everyone was a little dumbfounded. They could only see countless primordial chaos exploding and scattering into the universe. The divine radiance flickered, and it was as bright as the sun exploding. Yi Shiwen's storm-like offensive made everyone terrified. Yi Shiwen was simply the incarnation of the Time Lord, invincible. Is the Emperor's corpse really going to die today? When a quasi-emperor saw this, he felt a chill run down his spine. In the absence of the Emperor, this Emperor's corpse was already the world's top combat strength. Now that it had died so tragically, it was a huge blow to their souls. So what? The Emperor's corpse is not invincible. That time it was just caught off guard. Those powerful people did not take action. If the Inverse Emperor dares to use the Emperor's corpse to attack the Alliance headquarters, it will be destroyed in minutes. The Emperor's corpse is difficult to hurt, but it can be destroyed with a Dao tool. Some quasi-emperors said disdainfully. The Emperor's corpse was indeed the top combat power under the Emperor, but it was not invincible. The Emperor's corpse was after all just an Emperor's corpse, not a real Emperor. Kill! Everyone was still shocked, but for Yi Shiwen, the battle had just begun. He was already completely crazy. Behind him, a peerless enemy was faintly formed. The eye of redemption was completely opened, bursting with infinite light. One hand was the 6 paths of reincarnation fist, the other was the ruler's sword, and there was even the overturning sky seal. In order to kill the emperor's corpse, Yi Shiwen could be said to have used all his means. Boom! 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 The emperor's corpse was constantly bombarded. Even if this was the corpse of the fallen emperor, it was still broken by Yi Shiwen's violent attacks. Blood exploded, dyeing the sky red. Yi Shiwen's storm-like attacks were terrifying. No quasi-emperor had the confidence to resist. Yi Shiwen had exhausted all his attacks. There was no stronger attack than this. But even so, the inverse emperor in the emperor's corpse was not killed. The emperor's corpse was entwined with infinite laws. The laws of heaven manifested and automatically protected him, allowing his body to constantly recover. The body that was pierced by Yi Shiwen and split apart recovered in a short time, overflowing with divine light. Although he was defeated by Yi Shiwen and the Avicii sword, he did not die under such attacks. Boom! Yi Shiwen shouted, and the 6 paths of reincarnation fist was directly launched. It turned into a huge 6 paths of reincarnation fist, and then directly blasted towards the emperor's corpse's head. Boom! The emperor's corpse's head was blown up. Blood splattered and bone fragments flew. But this attack did not completely kill the inverse emperor. He even escaped and reassembled his injured body in the distance. His entire body was burning with flames. Nanmingli fire, eternal and unending. Even if it was the emperor's corpse, it would burn together with the emperor's corpse. The eyes of the emperor's corpse were staring at Yi Shiwen. He didn't get angry, nor did he roar. Only his ice-cold eyes were staring at Yi Shiwen. He was forcing himself to calm down in order to restore to his peak state. In such a battle, if he was dominated by anger, it was likely to cause unimaginable consequences. The Nanmingli fire was disappearing, and the wounds on his body were healing. Originally, the inverse emperor's figure could still be seen in the cracked emperor's corpse. Now, as the wounds continued to heal, it had completely disappeared. At this moment, the whole world seemed to be silent. Blood was flowing from the emperor's corpse. He had suffered a great loss in the series of attacks just now. Yi Shiwen had seized the opportunity to beat him up and teach him a lesson. He never expected that Yi Shiwen's attack would be so terrifying. Moreover, his attack was so decisive. In the face of the emperor's corpse, he did not have the slightest bit of fear. Many groups in the distance held their breath. The battle just now was too terrifying. Yi Shiwen actually suppressed the emperor's corpse and beat him up. He almost crushed the emperor's corpse and almost killed the inverse emperor. This result was too terrifying. Everyone felt it was difficult to breathe. Then, there was another wave of cold air. This was something that they had never imagined before. It was a wake-up call for many people. Strength did not mean that they could ignore everything. A seemingly small loophole could kill them. Chapter 2847. There was naturally no need to mention the tyrannical strength of the sovereign corpse, but in the end it was beaten to this state. Although it was not directly killed, its vitality was injured. In the end, the sovereign corpse was just a sovereign corpse, not a true sovereign emperor. Moreover, it did not awaken by itself and gave birth to intelligence, but was controlled. This was another layer of separation, and it could not truly display its full strength. So close to killing DNI. It was really close to succeeding. It's too terrifying. This Yi Shiwen is a bit too strong. With the help of the time robe, his strength is almost at the top of the world. Yi Shiwen, I still underestimated you. In the Emperor's corpse, Ni's voice finally came, and there was suppressed anger in his tone. Who was he? He was actually held down and beaten up like this, and he was even attacked by a sneak attack. Otherwise, even if he was not a match for Yi Shiwen in a head-on battle, He would not be beaten without the strength to fight back. Moreover, Yi Shiwen attacked like a storm as soon as he came up. Obviously, he wanted to kill him as soon as he came up. He could also feel such killing intent. Yi Shiwen sighed slightly. In the end, he still could not kill DNI. This was his biggest regret. Of course, he didn't really want to destroy the Emperor Corp. Even if he wore the robe of time, it was unlikely that he could do such a thing. Although his primordial spirit wasn't a real Emperor Lord, his physical body was a real Emperor Lord. Immortal, eternal, detached from the heavenly law, this was the real Emperor King. How could it be easily destroyed by others? It had almost infinite possibilities. Even in the face of Yi Shiwen's storm-like attacks, it still recovered quickly. This was the most terrifying thing about the Emperor's corpse, so his real purpose was to kill DNI in the Emperor's corpse. After killing DNI, the Emperor's corpse would stop, and he could also kill a huge trouble in the future. For DNI's current progress, no one knew what level he had reached. However, if he continued to be like this, one day in the future, he would be able to rush into the Emperor King realm in one go. That would be the most terrifying thing. Today, he could take this opportunity to kill him in one fell swoop, and that would be the best. Since ancient times, there had been a terrifying corpse disaster, which ended with the extinction of spiritual wisdom, and the corpse disaster was sealed. The method was the same. Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes and said coldly, DNI, since you're here today, don't even think about leaving. I'll eliminate you. I still underestimated you. You are strong enough, ruthless enough, and you grasped the opportunity very accurately. You have been through hundreds of battles, but it is a pity that you were just a little bit away from killing me. DNI said coldly. He could naturally see Yi Shiwen's purpose. If he were in Yi Shiwen's position, he would have done the same. Although there was such a flaw, he usually didn't take it to heart. Although it was a flaw, in reality, it couldn't be seen as such. The reason was very simple. Anyone who could break the sovereign corpse could pose a threat to him. And now Yi Shiwen had done it. This proved that his weakness was, after all, a weakness. No one had done it before, but it didn't mean that no one could do it. This also gave him a wake-up call. He would be more careful from now on. It would be even more impossible for Yi Shiwen to kill him. It doesn't matter. I didn't kill you this time, but there will be more chances. Yi Shiwen was not anxious, and his mood was not affected by DNI's words. He was absolutely tyrannical and absolutely confident. The recovery speed of the Emperor's corpse's body had reached an amazing level. Even compared to Yi Shiwen, who had used the Phoenix regeneration technique, it was not slow at all. He had not used any recovery technique, but simply the body was recovering on its own. This was the physical body of an emperor. It was far from what a divine king or quasi-emperor could compare with. It was even beyond imagination. DNI flipped his palm, and a divine elixir shining with endless divine light appeared. He then swallowed it, and the vitality of his body was rapidly recovering. After being beaten by Yi Shiwen just now, even if he didn't die, his vitality was greatly injured. Moreover, he had no backup. With his own strength, he couldn't support the sovereign corpse for a long time. Now that he had this divine elixir, it was completely different. Do you know what price I paid to get this divine elixir? DNI's voice was extremely calm, but it was extremely cold and extremely angry. But it doesn't matter. All the losses will be compensated by you. Your Taoist instruments, your adventures, all will become mine. All the losses can be compensated. Up until now, he would not underestimate Yi Shiwen anymore. He was very interested in Yi Shiwen's adventures. This kind of advancement speed was not normal, but it didn't matter. Soon, Yi Shiwen would be his. If you want it, then come and try, Yi Shiwen said coldly. He knew that the next battle would not be easy. It was a sneak attack just now. Now that DNI was on guard, it would be even more difficult to deal with. Kid, I'll leave the rest to you. Don't wake me up if there's nothing important. At this time, the spirit of the Avicii sword finally spoke. As soon as it finished speaking, it disappeared from the universe, leaving only the Avicii sword exuding an amazing bloody light. Then, it turned into a ball of light and fell into Yi Shiwen's hand. The departure of the spirit of the Avicii sword meant that Yi Shiwen had one more method, but his combat power would be relatively reduced. Well, there's no one below to interfere with our battle. You should be prepared to die. At this time, Dianai said coldly. Humph, then come and try. Yi Shiwen was not willing to say more. He attacked instantly. The demon's wings behind him spread out instantly. He directly rushed towards Dianai at an even more amazing speed. Humph, small tricks. Just now, you just took advantage of the situation. Do you think you can succeed now? Dianai's cold and ruthless voice came into Yi Shiwen's ears. He suddenly stretched out his palm and grabbed towards Yi Shiwen's face. He wanted to kill Yi Shiwen with one blow, not giving him any chance to survive. That big hand exuded endless immortal light and kept bursting with amazing power. Bang! This big hand directly hit Yi Shiwen's demon's wings. At this critical moment, Yi Shiwen wrapped his whole body with the demon's wings. On the demon's wings there were some dense cracks. It was simply unimaginable. Yi Shiwen only felt an incomparably strong power pouring into his body. It was truly a terrifying power. In the past, he had always crushed his opponents with absolute power. Now, he actually felt that the power was even stronger than him. It was really unimaginable. At the level of the Emperor, he had already transcended the heavenly law. He might have some advantages, but he would never have any shortcomings. Even the physical body of the Emperor, who was not good at physique cultivation, was far superior to the physical body of the most powerful quasi-emperor. It was not an exchange at the same level at all. The time robe exuded bursts of divine light and instantly digested this power. Without the time robe, it would be difficult for Yi Shiwen to contend with the Emperor's corpse by himself. It's my turn! Yi Shiwen roared and slashed out with his sword. The Avicii sword burst out a burst of amazing sword light. A sword aura crossed the sky and directly penetrated the Emperor's corpse. Because the position of both sides was very close, there was no room to dodge at all. It directly hit the Emperor's corpse. Bang! A huge crack appeared on the chest of the Emperor's corpse. Yi Shiwen's attack was terrifying. Yi Shiwen could injure the Emperor's corpse with the power of the time robe. Moreover, there was also the power of the Avicii sword. Although it was certainly not as powerful as when the spirit of the Avicii sword was awakened, it was enough for Yi Shiwen now. Damn it! Dianai roared and threw a punch at Yi Shiwen. Unimaginable power pierced through the universe and hit Yi Shiwen. Bang! Because the distance was too close, Yi Shiwen was directly hit and flew out on the spot. However, most of the damage was absorbed by the time robe. Yi Shiwen only felt a little stuffy. Compared to the Emperor's corpse that was cut by his sword, the injury was undoubtedly much lighter. However, the wound on the Emperor's corpse quickly disappeared without a trace. Although such an attack was terrifying, it was still within the scope of the Emperor's corpse. Yi Shiwen, although the Phoenix regeneration technique is powerful, it may not be able to defeat me, Dianai said coldly. Others don't know what secret technique you are practicing, but it is not difficult for us. It's a pity that this secret technique is most suitable for the Phoenix clan. After all, you are not from the Phoenix clan, so you can't really show the glory that this secret technique should have. Dianai said, but it doesn't matter. In the end, everything that you have will become mine. Ha 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 ha. Yi Shiwen operated the Phoenix regeneration technique. In just a breath's time, he had recovered to the peak. He looked at Dianai indifferently and said, "It is a little too early to be happy now." Too early? I don't think so. Yi Shiwen, it is time for you to die after forcing me to use my last trick. Do you really think that the Emperor's corpse only has this kind of trick? Even an ant like you can be defeated by a Dao weapon? Dianai said coldly. His body emitted a burst of terrifying light. The imprint of the Great Way quickly covered his body, and a terrifying aura instantly erupted from his body. Dianai's aura rose several times in one breath. It was almost above the universe. He had really stepped into the legendary realm, restored his peak combat power, and reappeared in the world. Yi Shiwen's expression became a little more dignified. Dianai's secret technique could actually enhance the strength of the Emperor's corpse. This was amazing. Yi Shiwen, from today on, your name will be erased. I will accept your 2 Dao weapons. Chapter 2848. Yi Shiwen, from today onwards, your name will be erased. I will take your 2 doctrine instruments. Dianai's cold voice was surging. The void around him was twisting. A strange power appeared around him, and a terrifying aura filled the sky. All the rules around him emerged and condensed into monstrous waves. The entire universe was trembling under this terrifying aura. It was as if he had regained the strength of a peak Emperor Lord. You want to take my doctrine instruments? You are thinking too much. Yi Shiwen said coldly. I will let you feel the difference between you and me. Dianai's voice was still cold. Swoosh. An unimaginably shocking wave broke through the void and attacked Yi Shiwen at a speed beyond the limit. Bang! There was a loud explosion, and a dazzling divine radiance exploded. A huge ripple formed by the principle fiercely bombarded Yi Shiwen. However, it dispersed in all directions around his body. Yi Shiwen's body swayed slightly. At the critical moment, the time robe on his body blocked this fatal blow. Just to defend against this attack, I have consumed hundreds of Emperor Source. Yi Shiwen frowned slightly. The power of this attack was many times stronger than before. After using the secret technique, the combat power of the Emperor's corpse was many times stronger. This is just the beginning, Dianai said coldly. In front of my absolute strength, you can't do anything. The Emperor's corpse was really powerful. If it wasn't for the doctrine instruments, Yi Shiwen wouldn't be able to fight against it with his current strength. The strength of an Emperor Lord was completely different from that of a divine king. Boom! In an instant, Dianai attacked again. His speed was beyond the limit. Space and time were disturbed instantly. Yi Shiwen couldn't see his movements at all. Bang! A terrifying attack hit Yi Shiwen's body hard, and his body shook violently. You have forced me to this point. Even if you are an Emperor Lord, you will still die. Dianai was still roaring. Bang! 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 There was a series of violent collisions in the universe. The battle between Yi Shiwen and Dianai was still progressing at an amazing speed. Dianai's aura became more and more violent. The Emperor Corpse's hair danced in the wind and his robe was cold. This chrono robe is pretty good. If I can use it, I'll be able to unleash even greater power. This is the true meaning of its existence. Dianai stared at the time robe on Yi Shiwen's body with an extremely greedy look in his eyes. Ha 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 ha, you want it? Let's see if you have the life to take it. Yi Shiwen laughed loudly. Your chrono robe is mine. Even your fortuitous encounters are all mine. Dianai's expression was extremely cold. In this battle, Yi Shiwen would have to pay the price of countless Emperor Source, and he would also have to pay a huge price. Only by killing Yi Shiwen, seizing his Dao tool, and plundering his fortuitous encounter could he make up for his loss. Boom! The battle was still going on. Dianai was the first to attack. Each of his attacks caused the entire universe to shake and the world to collapse. All of his attacks were destructive. His speed had reached the pinnacle, and his power had also reached the pinnacle. Even his nomological attacks had reached the pinnacle. He could even leave a mark on the time robe. Kill! Yi Shiwen's eyes burst with bursts of light. The divine light on his body swept outwards in a frenzy, with him as the center. It made him look like a huge storm. Behind him, a pair of wings spread out. It was the wings of Demon. Bang! In an instant, Yi Shiwen attacked. His fist pierced through the entire universe and instantly bombarded in front of the Emperor's corpse. There was another shocking collision. The Emperor's corpse and Yi Shiwen collided directly. "I've seen your power. Now I'll show you mine," Yi Shiwen shouted. As soon as he finished speaking, his figure had already appeared behind the Emperor's corpse. Suddenly, he swept his leg across the night sky like lightning. DNI was shocked and quickly fought back. His attack pierced through the heaven and earth, but it was unable to hurt Yi Shiwen. It directly passed through his body. At this time, Yi Shiwen had already flown in front of the Emperor's corpse. A sky-flipping seal directly smashed down. Boom! The sky-flipping seal carried the infinite power of time and smashed onto the Emperor's corpse. The huge power even made DNI and the Emperor's corpse let out a muffled groan. But then, an even more tyrannical aura erupted from the Emperor's corpse. It directly formed a big hand and grabbed towards Yi Shiwen's position. Boom! 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 An even more intense collision broke out in an instant. In every instant, there were hundreds and thousands of exchanges. The quasi-emperors in the distance held their breath. They did not dare to be careless for a moment. They were afraid that the outcome of the battle would be decided in an instant. At this time, they could not see the outcome of the battle. Whether it was Yi Shiwen with 2 Dao weapons or DNI who had stimulated the powerful strength of the Emperor's corpse, they were far more terrifying than they had imagined. Such combat power was not something they could guess. The battle between the two even surpassed the other Dao weapons that were fighting. The void was destroyed. Even the space that had been reinforced was collapsing. It was constantly reforming and collapsing. It was as if 2 ancient gods were destroying the world. The Emperor's corpse displayed countless earth-shattering techniques. Every one of them could set off a bloody storm. It was unknown whether it was the Emperor's corpse's own technique or DNI's, but it was extremely shocking. Yi Shiwen was not to be outdone. 6 paths of reincarnation fist, dominator swordsmanship, sky-flipping seal, demon wings, phoenix regeneration technique, and many other techniques were also not to be outdone. They were fully displayed and launched a storm-like attack. Gradually, everyone realized that Yi Shiwen's strength was increasing. The strength of each attack had a very shocking progress. "He is fusing martial arts incarnation," someone exclaimed. They all saw that on Yi Shiwen's body, there were figures fusing into his body. He was fusing martial arts incarnation while fighting. If he was not careful, he would die tragically. But he still did it, and he really did it. One could imagine how shocked everyone was. Although most of his combat power comes from the time robe, and after fusing martial arts incarnation, his combat power can't increase to the natural level, but after fusing with so many martial arts incarnations, his combat power will still have an amazing increase. An old quasi-emperor said in surprise, "But what surprised me is that he actually refined so many martial arts incarnations. What a lunatic!" Many quasi-emperors nodded at this time and agreed with this view. Although the more martial arts incarnations, the more tyrannical they were, it did not mean that more martial arts incarnations were better. This was because the condensation of each martial arts incarnation represented the affirmation of a martial art. Each martial art required endless energy, and there was a possibility that they were completely conflicting and incompatible. Therefore, many people often only chose one of the 3,000 great ways. All of them could be proved, and there was no need to be restricted by quantity. This was everyone's understanding, but Yi Shiwen had completely subverted their understanding today. He had fused so many martial arts in one breath, and there was no conflict at all. Why was this? How did he do it? Yi Shiwen's combat power was still increasing at an amazing speed. "Impossible!" DNI roared, feeling like he had been completely deceived. Just when he thought he had grasped all of Yi Shiwen's strength, Yi Shiwen's outbreak suddenly gave him a big slap. Yi Shiwen's strength was far more than that. After using all his strength, he still couldn't take down Yi Shiwen, which made him anxious. His heart began to give birth to warning signs, and an extremely dangerous feeling suddenly jumped to the alarm clock. Boom! Yi Shiwen grabbed from the void, and the energy of the stars in the endless Milky Way turned into a huge ribbon seal, which blasted down on the spot. Boom! All the defensive energy on the Emperor's corpse suddenly dispersed, rushing in all directions, and many stars swept by the aftermath exploded on the spot. Boom! This blow directly hit the head of the Emperor's corpse, and it directly staggered and almost knelt down. Blood splattered from the head, and it almost exploded. Do you think you are a real emperor after entering the Emperor's corpse? That's ridiculous. Yi Shiwen laughed loudly. You are courting death. D&I roared, and there was a burst of chanting coming from his body, as if countless gods were chanting ancient scriptures in every cell of his. These scriptures were the incarnation of the Great Path, and they turned into Tao characters on the spot, forming a shocking energy light beam that blasted towards Yi Shiwen. That energy light beam was like a huge mountain, piercing through the sky. This is the end. The Avicii sword in Yi Shiwen's hand suddenly awakened, and a blood-red energy wave swept through the entire universe. Dominate the world! At this moment, Yi Shiwen seemed to have incarnated as an emperor, holding the Avicii sword, turning the world into Azura, turning it into a holy kingdom that he controlled. Crash! The blood-red sword light slashed down, instantly cutting the light beam, and the sword light's momentum did not decrease, directly slashing down. Puff! The sword light fiercely slashed the Emperor's corpse. In an instant, countless Tao runes appeared. The laws and Tao runes of both sides fiercely clashed. Many strange phenomena appeared in the sky. It seemed like the sky was crying because of this battle. Boom! There was a huge explosion, and the sword light smashed the protective aura of the Emperor's corpse, and directly slashed the body of the Emperor's corpse. Puff! Blood splattered everywhere in an instant, and the golden blood exploded along with the endless golden light. Chapter 2849. Blood sprayed out and turned into a blood mist. Every drop of this blood essence was extremely precious. Many people could even get a drop of it as a great fortune. Bang! Then there was a huge roar. Everyone only saw the Emperor's corpse was completely shrouded in a blood mist. The Emperor's corpse flew out instantly. A Taoist tool could hurt an Emperor's corpse, let alone a super Taoist tool like the Avicii sword. Many people were stunned for a while and didn't know what to say. Although they had already expected that the outcome would be revealed in an instant, they never expected that the real outcome would be revealed so quickly. Almost in an instant, Yi Shiwen completely reversed the situation and broke the Emperor's corpse's defense with the Avicii sword. Is Yi Shiwen going to win? Oh my God, the situation of the entire heavens and realms is going to change. Another unparalleled hero has risen. Who will dare to look down on him in the future? Everyone was still amazed, but Yi Shiwen's attack had just begun. The Avicii sword dragged through the void and drew a bloody light. Yi Shiwen's entire body broke through the universe in an instant and directly rushed to the Emperor's corpse. Another sword slashed down. That sword light cut through the universe and shook the world. Bang! Another huge blood flower bloomed on the Emperor's corpse. A huge blood mark was torn on the Emperor's corpse, deep to the bone, and even the figure of D&I could be seen. D&I's voice was constantly screaming and roaring. He had entered the Emperor's corpse so naturally, his whole body was integrated into it. The Emperor's corpse was seriously injured, and he was also seriously injured. He could also feel great pain. Yi Shiwen. He roared angrily and gritted his teeth. His steel teeth were almost broken. He had been forced into a corner by Yi Shiwen. He thought that he could already burst out the most powerful power, enough to crush any enemy, but in the end, he was completely beaten by Yi Shiwen. This was a humiliation to him. He had come here today to end a future powerful enemy, to get rid of a great trouble. But if this continued, it would be terrible. He was going to be finished. Yi Shiwen's expression was incomparably cold. One strike after another, he didn't hold back in the slightest. Both sides were the same. They couldn't hold on for too long, so they wanted to end the fight quickly. However, NID was obviously knocked unconscious by Yi Shiwen's series of attacks. He was still a little dumbfounded, unable to react. How did things suddenly turn out like this? It's useless no matter how much you shout. Today, I'm going to get rid of you completely. Yi Shiwen's eyes were cold. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for him. He could get rid of this big trouble. He could get rid of this big trouble of the heavens and the 10,000 realms. Countless people wanted to get rid of NID, but NID was very cunning. Ever since the Tian clan came out, he had never shown himself again. He had been hiding all this time. Obviously, he wanted to come out only after he achieved the Tao. And now, it had appeared here in order to kill Yi Shiwen. It could be said that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. At this time, in the heavens, all the quasi-emperors hoped that Yi Shiwen could succeed. As long as they could successfully kill the rebellious emperor, Yi Shiwen's rise in power was nothing. Yi Shiwen's rise in power was just another supermaster in the heavens and the myriad realms. However, if the rebellious emperor succeeded, then they would all perish in the hands of the heavenly clan. If an emperor-monarch were to appear in the Tian clan, they would probably all die. You must succeed. Kill this damned inverse emperor. Of course, it's best if both sides are injured and die together. Many quasi-emperors still had a glimmer of hope in their hearts. If both sides were injured and died together, it would be the best ending for the heavens. Without a big problem, and with the death of a future emperor, there was nothing more wonderful than this ending. However, Yi Shiwen obviously wouldn't do as they wished. He directly rushed towards NID. The sword radiance pointed at NID, who was in the middle of the emperor's corpse. He wanted to get rid of NID's spirit and body in one breath. Yi Shiwen, don't be too arrogant. NID roared. The body of the emperor's corpse emitted endless light and blasted towards Yi Shiwen in one breath. Break for me. Yi Shiwen roared and slashed down with his sword. All the counterattacks were destroyed, and the last hope in NID's heart was also destroyed. Bang! The sword radiance fell on the body of the emperor's corpse again. The body of the emperor's corpse exploded instantly and was badly mutilated. NID screamed. In the attack just now, his arm was swept by the sword radiance of the Avicii sword. His entire arm was destroyed. Without the protection of the emperor's corpse, it was a huge nightmare for him to fight against a Tao tool with his own cultivation. Yi Shiwen's eyes revealed a bit of surprise. Everything was as he expected. What he needed to do now was to kill NID. Boom! 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 Yi Shiwen's attacks continued to fall on the body of the emperor's corpse. At this time, NID could only defend against Yi Shiwen's attacks and had no strength to fight back. However, no matter how much he resisted, he was still scratched by the Avicii sword. Once he was scratched, his entire arm would explode. His physical body was too weak compared to a Tao tool. Yi Shiwen. Suddenly, a loud shout came from afar. The Sky Splitter spear was pointed at Yi Shiwen, and a terrifying spear radiance burst out. It was heading towards Yi Shiwen. Seeing that NID was about to be defeated and die, the Sky Splitter spear finally couldn't help but attack. How dare you be distracted while fighting against me? You're courting death. At this time, a huge bell sound spread across the universe and formed a terrifying sound wave. It directly shattered the spear radiance of the Sky Splitter spear and turned it into nothingness. It did not hurt Yi Shiwen at all. At this time, the myriad worlds diagram also tried to help, but it was entangled by Yimo. At this time, Yimo's body was completely burning with blood-red radiance. He was using all his strength and burning the Tianyuan mirror to block the myriad worlds diagram for Yi Shiwen. With the protection of these two masters, Yi Shiwen did not have to worry at all. "NID, wait for your death in peace. No one can save you now." Yi Shiwen held the Avicii sword and accelerated his attack, not giving NID a chance to breathe. Because he knew very well that once a master of this level was given a chance to breathe, he would most likely escape in the end. I'm not willing, I'm not willing," NID roared angrily. The Emperor's opportunity on his body began to reveal itself, bursting out bursts of astonishing green radiance. He was extremely angry. He was a dignified future emperor, an invincible figure destined to become an emperor. He was going to die here, in the hands of his greatest enemy. Clang! The Avicii sword once again burst out bursts of Dominator's sword and slashed down. Puff! The sword light slashed on the body of the Emperor's corpse. The huge crack on the Emperor's corpse was torn open little by little. Although the Emperor's corpse had a strong recovery ability, his recovery ability could not keep up with the speed of Yi Shiwen's destruction. Moreover, the Avicii sword's sword aura was extremely fierce. He could not even extinguish Yi Shiwen's sword aura in time. Finally, NID was completely exposed in the Emperor's corpse. He was wrapped in a ball of Emperor's opportunity, and his figure was completely revealed. "Now is the time," Yi Shiwen roared. "No one can save you now. It's over. The ambition of your Tian clan will be buried today." The sword light grew bigger and bigger in the void, like an ancient divine mountain, and slashed down on the spot. Swish! At this time, a talisman pierced through the sky and directly blasted into Yi Shiwen's sword light that was slashing down. Rumble! There was a huge explosion, and the dazzling divine light spread throughout the universe. No one could open their eyes. Great freedom heaven! Everyone only heard Yi Shiwen's angry roar. Only then did they realize that Great Freedom Heaven had attacked just now. That talisman should be the Great Freedom Talisman. At the critical moment, when Yi Shiwen was about to kill NID, he still made a move. From the beginning of the battle until now, Yi Shiwen had not made a move. Therefore, they had almost forgotten that this was the top expert in the world. They thought that he had been restrained by others. They did not expect him to make a move at this critical moment. Even Yi Shiwen had forgotten about this. He thought that Great Freedom Heaven had been restrained. He did not expect that the critical attack would be blocked by him. Yi Shiwen's attack did not hit NID. However, he saw that the Great Freedom Talisman had turned into a cloud, and directly wrapped NID's real body and Emperor's opportunity. NID fled frantically into the distance. He did not even have time to take the Emperor's corpse with him. He fled in panic. "Go to hell!" Yi Shiwen was instantly angry. The Avicii sword in his hand turned into a ball of bloody light, and directly rushed out. It formed a huge sword rainbow across the entire universe, and directly pursued NID. Bang! The sword rainbow crashed into the Great Freedom Talisman, and directly pierced through it. It blasted NID's body. Ah! NID's tragic laughter came from the Great Freedom Talisman. Obviously, he had been hit by the Avicii sword and was instantly severely injured. The Great Freedom Talisman was pierced, but it did not stop. It frantically fled into the depths of the universe. Yi Shiwen wanted to continue chasing, but the myriad worlds diagram and the sky-splitting spear blocked his way. He fought and retreated, also fleeing into the depths of the universe. Before Yi Shiwen could react, he suddenly felt many tyrannical auras suddenly appeared around him, surrounding him from all directions. They were all experts from the Allied forces. He instantly understood, and could not help but say bitterly, "This old fox." Chapter 2850. This old fox. Yi Shiwen knew that the experts of the Allied forces had secretly gathered here, planning to kill the rebellious emperor with Yi Shiwen. In the face of DNI, the greatest threat, no matter how the Allied forces of the various races harbored evil intentions, no matter who would have thought that he would be discovered in advance. The Great Freedom Heaven released the Great Freedom Talisman to rescue the rebellious emperor. He would rather let the Great Freedom Talisman be injured by Yi Shiwen's Avicii sword in order to take the rebellious emperor away. Anyone else would have made the same choice. After all, compared to the inverse emperor, who could become an emperor, the Great Freedom Talisman of the Great Freedom Sky was nothing. A brave man cuts his wrist. Indeed, Mahesvara had the courage to do so, but to be able to make such a decisive decision in such a short amount of time showed that Mahesvara was not just any ordinary decisive person. Yi Shiwen's breathing quickened a bit. It was already the last moment, but it was all for naught. It would be fine if it was someone else, but it was the rebellious emperor. Although the threat of the rebellious emperor was not as great as Great Freedom Heaven, the situation between the two was completely different. Yi Shiwen was not Great Freedom Heaven's opponent now, but he would be killed sooner or later in 100 or 1,000 years. Yi Shiwen had such confidence. However, the rebellious emperor could not be left alone. If he was given a few 100 or 1,000 years, only God knew how far the rebellious emperor would progress. Although he had only seen the rebellious emperor's real body for a short time, he had already determined that the rebellious emperor was a real quasi-emperor. Although the rebellious emperor could not defeat him in terms of strength, the worst was not now, but in the future. The huge bottleneck of becoming an emperor did not exist for the rebellious emperor. In the end, it was all for naught. Yi Shiwen clenched his fists and took a deep breath. Suddenly, a big hand descended from the sky. It broke through the sky and grabbed the emperor's corpse floating in the universe. Between the fingers of the big hand, there were infinite law stripes, which directly transformed into a big net. It was about to capture the emperor's corpse. Everyone was shocked. Just when everyone was still immersed in the matter of the rebellious emperor's escape, someone made a decisive move. No one was surprised. The emperor's corpse was so precious that no one would care about it. However, they did not expect that someone would make a move like this. There was no discussion at all. "You're courting death," Yi Shiwen shouted and slashed with the Avicii sword. Pucci! The sword light traversed the sky and pierced through everything, directly slashing the huge hand in the air and exploding it. Ah! Yi Shiwen! Behind the space crack, there was a violent explosion and angry roar. Yi Shiwen's attack had injured the main body. It was not as simple as a chi-condensed giant hand. "Courting death," Yi Shiwen said coldly. His expression was like a sharp sword that could pierce through everything. "Yi Shiwen, this emperor's corpse should belong to the Allied forces," an old voice came. "Do you think I'm a 3-year-old? Yi Shiwen coldly looked around. "I didn't see any of you coming to help me when I was crossing the tribulation just now. Now you want to get a share of the loot? Are your brains broken? Or is it because I'm getting old that I'm not as sharp as before?" "Yi Shiwen, what did you say?" Hearing Yi Shiwen's words, many powerful experts suddenly became angry. "Didn't you hear what I said? You're really old," Yi Shiwen said indifferently. "Humph, Yi Shiwen, don't be too arrogant. Do you think you're great just because you've crossed the Emperor Tribulation? In front of us, what are you?" Another shout came. "If you're so capable, come out and talk with your real body. Anyway, I've just defeated the Inverse Emperor. I don't care if there's another one." Yi Shiwen casually glanced around and said. These voices all spoke in the dark and didn't appear. Obviously, they didn't want to expose their real bodies. They didn't want to confront Yi Shiwen head-on and fight. If it was before, they might not care at all. He was just a younger generation. If he dared to talk to them, he would be courting death. Previously, Martial Sect was standing behind Yi Shiwen. They had to give martial sex some face, so they didn't make a move. Now, Yi Shiwen himself was a pillar. He didn't need anyone to support him. Even the emperor's corpse was destroyed by him. Once such a person went crazy, who could stand it? Obviously, Yi Shiwen wanted to ensure that the emperor's corpse wouldn't be lost. The emperor's corpse contained too many secrets. Losing the emperor's corpse was no less than losing a Dao tool. It might even be a more serious loss. Obviously, everyone was very clear about this. Yi Shiwen, do you think you can contend against the world? Someone said in the dark. Contend against the world? Against the world? A disdainful smile flashed across Yi Shiwen's mouth. Then, he said, how many of you are there? Do you think you can represent the world? You're just going to treat them as representatives of the common people? Anyway, I'll say it here. Whoever dares to make a move will die. If you want to try, just reach out. Yi Shiwen held the Avicii sword in his hand and just looked coldly at the dark universe. I don't believe this. Suddenly, Emperor Quasi made a move. In the darkness, a crack in the space instantly appeared beside the Emperor's corpse. A big hand suddenly grabbed out and directly grabbed the Emperor's corpse. It seems that you really don't believe this. Yi Shiwen sneered. He took a step forward and directly appeared in front of the big hand. He directly slashed down with his sword. Poochie! The huge hand was suddenly chopped into pieces in midair. Just when the Emperor Quasi-Masters were ready to make a move and were about to make a move, suddenly, they saw that Yi Shiwen not only cut off the big hand, but also directly burst out an amazing sword light, which pierced through the sky and directly slashed towards the Emperor Quasi in the crack. Boom! A huge explosion came, and the sword light swept into the crack in the space. The space collapsed, and a figure appeared on the other side of the crack. The face of this powerful Emperor Quasi showed a bit of a surprised and angry expression. He did not expect that Yi Shiwen would really dare to chase to this extent. However, what made him even more surprised and angry was that Yi Shiwen did not stop his attack. He directly rushed over with the Avicii sword in his hand. Puff! The long sword directly pierced into his body like cutting tofu. The strong defense of the Emperor Quasi was useless, and was directly pierced by the Avicii sword. Ah! The Emperor Quasi screamed, and instantly his spirit was destroyed. His body was also swallowed by Yi Shiwen's demon summoning banner. Yi Shiwen killed Emperor Quasi in an instant. His amazing hand speed and ruthless attitude instantly suppressed the Emperor Quasi, who were ready to make a move. They originally thought that Yi Shiwen would certainly not be able to do anything if they attacked at the same time. After all, the law does not punish the masses. Everyone knew that the law does not punish the masses. In the end, they did not expect that Yi Shiwen directly came up and ruthlessly attacked them first. A powerful Emperor Quasi was killed just like that. He did not even have the opportunity to announce his name, or rather, Yi Shiwen did not give him this opportunity at all. He did not care who this person was, and which force he came from. No matter who it was, if they wanted to retaliate against him, he could withstand it. Everyone understood Yi Shiwen's hidden words. This time, he did not ask who it was. Whether it was the king's sect or the emperor's inheritance, whoever dared to reach out would die. Those who did not believe in heresy could come and try. If someone else had dared to be so arrogant, he would have killed them in minutes. However, Yi Shiwen was different. He was really different. Although it was not to say that no one was a match for him, but no one dared to say that they could kill him. He had only cultivated for a few thousand years now. If they could not kill him and let him escape, then after countless years, when he came back for revenge, they would not be able to withstand it. The revenge of Emperor Quasi, who had 2 Dao tools. Everyone felt a chill down their spine when they thought about it. In the myriad worlds, such things were not uncommon. In fact, it happened all the time. How could they not be worried? This Yi Shiwen is really courageous. Isn't he afraid of offending everyone? He has offended the heavenly race. If he offends the coalition army, there will be no place for him in the heavens and earth. Place for him? Look at him. Does he still need a place for him? He himself is the pillar that supports the heavens, holding up a world. He is too strong. His rise cannot be stopped. There will be another top master in the heavens and earth. Yi Shiwen was very satisfied that he had suppressed everyone with one blow. Today, he did not kill the inverse emperor. However, if he could not even keep the emperor's corpse, then the loss would be too great. The emperor's corpse contained the secret of the great emperor's attainment. No one would not be tempted. For millions of years there were only a few opportunities like this. However, anyone who obtained the emperor's corpse would obtain a lot of benefits in the end. It was not a problem for their cultivation to improve in a short period of time. Even the emperor of the heavenly race was no exception. Those who achieved the Tao were essentially the same. It was just that the martial arts they cultivated were different. Whether Yi Shiwen could go further in a short period of time or even reach the legendary realm, it all depended on him. Therefore, this time, he would not retreat, even if he had to go against the world. He could achieve the Tao before the inverse emperor. Now, it was not only related to his own matters, but also related to the world, as well as those he loved and those he wanted to protect. Yi Shiwen directly put the emperor's corpse into the time robe. Except for such a Tao tool, no other instrument could accommodate the emperor's corpse. The emperor's corpse had its own world and its own rules. If an ordinary instrument wanted to accommodate it, there would only be one result: it would collapse on the spot. Since everyone has no objections, then disperse. Yi Shiwen waved his hand as if he was talking about something trivial. Immediately, Yi Shiwen solemnly said to the demon Emperor Bell, "Thank you for your help, Senior." Chapter 2851. He didn't know how many people were secretly helping him in this battle in addition to his own preparations. However, the demon Emperor's bell had solved a huge problem for him. Otherwise, he would have had to face many twists and turns to cross the tribulation. But the demon Emperor's bell had solved a huge problem for him. It was not so easy to solve the problem. Every time these Tao tools awakened, they had to pay a huge price. They could not be awakened just because they wanted to. If it was not a last resort, generally Tao tools would not choose to awaken naturally. It consumed too much of their source. Therefore, the help of the demon Emperor Bell was particularly valuable. At the same time, he was also grateful for the help of the ancient heavenly court. Although Yi Wudi helped him in the end, and although Yi Wudi was the master of the ancient heavenly court, helping him resist the Tao tool was naturally not something he could do. The other big shots of the ancient heavenly court must have also agreed. People say that a just cause enjoys much support, while an unjust cause finds little support. It seemed that although he had enemies all over the world, it was not that he did not have any friends at all. He had not failed to that point. "It's nothing. You helped us once on the Demon Island before. This time, I am just returning the favor." Besides, Yi Wudi also asked, "How could I not help him?" The Demon Emperor Bell said slowly. On the Demon Island, Yi Shiwen opened the seal and helped the Demon Emperor Bell greatly. This was also the cause of the cause, and naturally, the fruit of today's harvest. Especially at that time, the people of the underworld wanted to blaspheme the dead Demon Emperor, which was even more unforgivable. "In any case, I am very grateful for Senior's help today," Yi Shiwen said. Everyone listened to the conversation between the two, and only then did they know that the two sides had already crossed paths. Everyone knew that Yi Shiwen and Yi Wudi were close friends. Now they were both big shots who could influence the heavens and the myriad worlds. Many people also knew about the matters between them. However, what happened on the Demon Island that day was not something that they could investigate. They only knew that when Yi Shiwen left the Demon Island, Yi Wudi also followed him out. No one knew the specifics of what happened. It seemed that there were still some secrets that they did not know. Especially since he was able to completely revive the Demon Emperor Bell to help him defend against the Tao artifact in order to repay this favor. One could imagine that this favor was definitely not small. It was useless even if everyone was curious. It was obvious that both sides didn't have the desire to talk anymore. Many people were a bit surprised by Yi Shiwen's appearance. Many people had said that Yi Shiwen was arrogant and despotic since his debut. Some had said that he had no respect for anyone. Some had even said that he was vicious and merciless. He was decisive in killing and so on. However, no one had expected that he would have such a side to him. This had made many people feel as if their glasses were about to fall off. It seemed that Yi Shiwen wasn't always so domineering. In fact, he was someone who acted according to the situation. He would naturally be grateful to those who were good to him. However, he wouldn't let go of those who were against him. His personality of distinguishing between love and hate was undoubtedly reflected. Well, this battle is over. I should also leave. You are very good. Even the Demon Emperor thought highly of you and said that your future was limitless. Even he couldn't see through your future. Now, it seems that the Demon Emperor was right. Work hard. After the Demon Emperor Bell finished speaking, it instantly turned into a ball of light and disappeared into the universe. The Demon Emperor thought highly of Yi Shiwen? This explosive news shocked everyone in an instant. The Demon Emperor mentioned by the Demon Emperor Bell, if there was no accident, then it should be the invincible Demon Emperor of the past. However, that Demon Emperor had already fallen many years ago. This was something that many people knew. He had already fallen for so long. So, how could he still have an encounter with Yi Shiwen? Yi Shiwen had only cultivated for a few years. So, how could he possibly have an encounter with the Demon Emperor? This was simply illogical. How many secrets were there in this that they didn't know? Or could it be that the Demon Emperor was not dead at all and was still alive? Many people couldn't help but feel a chill down their spines when they thought of this. What a joke. If that legendary figure wasn't dead, then it would be no different from a bolt from the blue to them. If a terrifying existence that could affect the balance of power was still alive, then it would have an unpredictable impact on the entire war situation. Why was the NID so hated? Wasn't it because he might affect the balance of the heavens in the future? Although everyone knew that this probability was not very high, after all, there were many witnesses who were still alive when the Demon Emperor fell. There was even an emperor who personally admitted that the Demon Emperor had indeed fallen. However, such a thing was better to be safe than sorry. Who knew what kind of life-saving means a figure like the Demon Emperor had? No one knew that he had survived from that time until now. And the experts of the Demon Clan were even more delighted. Although the Demon Clan was now known to be on par with the Human Clan and the Devil Clan, there was no leader. The ancient heavenly court had been destroyed for countless years. It had only risen again in recent years. It lacked a stabilizing force. If the Demon Emperor was still alive, then everything would be different. It would be enough for the Demon Clan to leap above the Human Clan and the Devil Clan. Impossible, the Demon Emperor can't still be alive. If he is still alive, why hasn't he appeared for so many years and watched the ancient heavenly court decline? Could it be that he was seriously injured and on the verge of death? Someone made a bold conjecture. This was the most likely conjecture. The Demon Emperor might not be dead, but the serious injuries he had suffered in the past had caused him to be seriously injured until now. Of course, the premise of all this was that the Demon Emperor was still alive. If he was dead, then all of this would be a blind guess. The more people thought about it, the more they felt that it was possible. The Demon Emperor Bell had personally revived to repay a favor. Originally, no one could think of what kind of situation it was. However, wasn't this the most likely conjecture now? Yi Shiwen must have unintentionally helped the seriously injured and dying Demon Emperor in the past. Therefore, the demon Emperor Bel would remember him until now. It was even possible that the demon emperor had secretly given an order. As soon as this conjecture came out, many people's breathing suddenly became rapid. A living demon emperor, even if he was seriously injured and on the verge of death, still had the ability to change the situation. Some people thought that if the demon emperor revived and reappeared in the world, then what should they do? Some people also wanted to ask the demon emperor to come out and clean up the mess. Last time, the demon emperor had fallen in the battle against the heavens. This time, he could be considered to have played his part. Some of them were even crazier and even had designs on the demon emperor. Although the means of a living demon emperor, even if it was on the brink of death, were terrifying enough, the benefits would be unimaginable if they succeeded in doing so. If the demon emperor was at his peak, even if he was seriously injured, no one would dare to have such a crazy idea. However, there was a speculation that he was seriously injured and on the verge of death. How could they not be excited? Everyone had their own crazy ideas. It seemed that the speculation that the demon emperor still existed in the world had scared them. They had almost forgotten about the matter of Yi Shiwen ruthlessly beheading a quasi-emperor just now. Compared to this matter, it seemed that what Yi Shiwen had done just now was nothing. At this time, Yi Shiwen naturally didn't know that a simple conversation had made those high and mighty big shots think so much. Only he himself knew that the demon emperor mentioned by the demon emperor Bel should be the remaining trace of the demon emperor's soul at that time, and not the demon emperor himself. The demon emperor Bel said that he had helped a lot, but it was not to help the dying demon emperor, but to help him get rid of the threat of the underworld. Especially the demon emperor Bel, which was coveted by the underworld at that time. At this time, Yimo finally returned to Yi Shiwen's side. He frowned slightly and said to Yi Shiwen, after this battle, I am afraid that Tianyuan mirror will degrade by several grades. It burned too much of its origin in this battle, and it will sleep for a long time. It doesn't matter, this time the most dangerous situation is finally over, and all the efforts were worth it, Yi Shiwen said with a smile. This battle had a huge harvest, but the losses were also not small. Not to mention the loss of the Emperor's source, he also had to pay a lot of favors. The favors owed would have to be returned one day, and Tianyuan mirror had directly degenerated to the level of an ordinary divine tool. In order to fight against the Dao tool, Yimo had stimulated the ability of Tianyuan mirror to the maximum limit, and had also left an indelible Dao injury. Yimo, have you ever thought of taking back Tianyuan mirror? Yi Shiwen asked. Take back? Yimo's expression suddenly shook. You mean, you want to give Tianyuan mirror to me? Yes, I want to give Tianyuan mirror to you, Yi Shiwen said. You are originally a tool spirit, and if you don't have Tianyuan mirror, you will never be able to achieve Dao. Now, I will give it back to you, and give you a chance to achieve Dao. Yimo's body slightly trembled, and his expression was still incomparably shocked. He had never thought that Yi Shiwen would actually return Tianyuan mirror to him. He was originally a tool spirit, and now he had separated from Tianyuan mirror to form his own body. However, his connection with Tianyuan mirror had never been broken, or else he wouldn't have been able to stimulate the origin of Tianyuan mirror to fight against the Dao tool. That was his root, his foundation, and if he wanted to achieve Dao, this was his only way. As a tool spirit of a Dao tool, his starting point was much higher than the average person, but his path was also narrower than others, and this was the only way. However, he had never mentioned it in the past, because Yi Shiwen had already refined Tianyuan mirror into a natal divine tool. Could it be that Yi Shiwen had to give up Tianyuan mirror? This would undoubtedly lead to a huge loss of his strength. Therefore, although he knew about this method, he had never mentioned it, but now Yi Shiwen had proposed it himself. If that's the case, then what about yourself? Yimo quickly said. Me? I also want to have my own natal divine tool. I didn't understand it before, but Tianyuan mirror is a help to me, but in the end it will also become a restraint to me. Every emperor walks on a unique path, and no one can achieve Tao by walking on someone else's path. Chapter 2852. Although Tianyuan mirror has been completely refined by me, it is not my own Tao tool after all, Yi Shiwen said with a smile. Although Tianyuan mirror is good, but the so-called Tao tool is a tool that carries the Tao of the emperor. Each one is unique. Tianyuan mirror does not carry my Tao, it is now my help, but sooner or later it will become my shackles, binding me to the Tao of the Demon King. In that case, I might as well let go of it as soon as possible. Yi Shiwen was speaking from the bottom of his heart. He had only vaguely felt this truth before, but after experiencing the heavenly tribulation, he suddenly understood and reacted. Giving up Tianyuan mirror was not only giving Yi Mo an opportunity to attain the Tao, but also letting go of his own shackles. Once he truly understood it, he felt that his mental cultivation had made a huge breakthrough. In fact, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he had advanced by leaps and bounds. What cultivators feared most was that their thoughts were not clear. Unlocking one was like unlocking a lock, unlocking a shackle, and advancing further. Well, you don't have to be like this. This is good for both of us. What kind of relationship do we have? There is no need to say this. Moreover, after losing Tianyuan mirror, it will not affect us too much. The key is that Avicii sword and time robe are in our hands. It does not matter. Yi Shiwen said. Time robe was different from Avicii sword. Although he had refined it, it was not a life source tool. It had nothing to do with his Tao. It was just an external tool, so naturally it did not matter. Okay, I understand. Yi Mo was not pretentious and directly agreed. He did not say much. The two of them had been fighting together for many years, and there was no need to use these words to say anything. Okay, the matter here is over, let's go back first. Yi Shiwen casually broke the space channel of the Demon King's treasure house, and he, Yi Mo and Yi Qianqian directly entered the channel. This time, the battle of crossing the heavenly tribulation was completely over. At this time, everyone had just recovered from the shock of knowing that the Demon Emperor might still be alive, and watched helplessly as Yi Shiwen left. Even if they coveted the Emperor's corpse, they did not dare to say anything at this time. That unlucky quasi-emperor was instantly killed in one move. This was a lesson to be learned from the mistakes of others. After entering the treasure house, Yi Shiwen finally heaved a sigh of relief. He was afraid that some old guy would disregard his reputation and attack him halfway. Although he was not afraid, the speed at which the Emperor's source was consumed made him feel distressed. At the same time, he also made up his mind to improve his cultivation as soon as possible. After all, relying on the power of the time robe was not the way to go. He did not fear anyone with the power of the time robe, and he could even contend against peaked quasi-emperors. However, if the top experts like True Immortal Fire Dragon and Mahasvara also wielded Tao weapons, they would be able to suppress him. There was still a considerable gap between him and these people, and he needed to improve further. Yi Mo directly entered the depths of the Devil King's treasure house and began to refine the Tianyuan mirror. However, the Tianyuan mirror was, after all, his body, so refining it was not very difficult, and it did not take a long time. How are you these days? Yi Shiwen looked at Yi Qianqian's delicate face and asked. I'm all right, Yi Qianqian said with a tired look on her face. Yi Qianqian gently embraced Yi Shiwen and found a comfortable position to lean on his chest. You and the underworld? What's going on? Yi Shiwen asked. He could guess that Yi Qianqian's cultivation had made great progress during this period of time, and she must have experienced a lot of things. So, it was normal for her to be tired. Hey, I have obtained the inheritance of the Death Lord, and it is related to the underworld, Yi Qianqian explained to Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen came to know the true origin of the Death Lord. He was a young hero of the underworld, and he enjoyed a great reputation in the underworld. He was almost going to become the next king of hell in the future, and he would be in charge of the underworld. However, he later betrayed the underworld and fled to the myriad heavens. Then, he made a name for himself as the Death Lord, and became famous all over the world. Yi Qianqian could only be regarded as having some connection with the underworld. However, she later entered the heavenly kingdom of death, and obtained the inheritance of the Lord of the underworld. The Lord of the underworld? An Emperor Lord? Yi Shiwen asked. Yi Qianqian nodded and said, "He is indeed an Emperor Lord, but he has never been born, so no one knows about him." Sure enough, Yi Shiwen wasn't surprised. In the myths and legends, he could contend with the Azura Devil King, and beat back the Devil Army. He wouldn't believe that there wasn't an Emperor Lord in charge of the underworld. Later, a rebellion broke out in the underworld, and the Lord of the underworld died in this rebellion. His divine kingdom evolved into the heavenly kingdom of death, and I obtained his inheritance there. I also learned some things. Yi Qianqian continued. In fact, there were 2 emperors in the underworld. Apart from the Lord of the underworld, there was also the Emperor of the underworld. Both of them were in charge of the underworld, but many years ago, the Emperor of the underworld suddenly attacked the Lord of the underworld for some unknown reason, which led to the fall of the Lord of the underworld. Even the underworld was taken away, and it was turned into the netherworld kingdom. However, the Emperor of the underworld didn't fare much better. He was seriously injured and has yet to recover. He has been hiding in the depths of the underworld to recuperate. The netherworld, the Een soldiers, the expedition. Yi Shiwen suddenly recalled the time when he was on the underworld river on the Demon Island. He had clearly seen countless Een soldiers gathering on the underworld river. They were wielding swords and weapons, and they were attacking the endless void, fighting in an unknown direction. At that time, he felt that these Een soldiers must be fighting something. However, the Een soldiers of the underworld were too mysterious, and even he didn't know what they were. Now that he heard Yi Qianqian's words, he suddenly understood. All along, everyone had treated the netherworld kingdom and the underworld kingdom as one of the same forces. It was just that their names were different. This was true in the early years, but now it was completely wrong. The 2 sides had already embarked on the path of hostility. It turned out that there was such a grudge behind all this. The underworld and the netherworld had been fighting for countless years. Among them, the Lord of the underworld had fallen, and the Emperor of the underworld had also been seriously injured. As a result, both sides had lost their fundamental strength. Although the netherworld had the upper hand, they couldn't directly eliminate the power of the underworld. This kind of expedition in an unknown place had been fighting for countless years, and it had never stopped. However, since these 2 were able to work together to establish the underworld, why did they suddenly fall out? Yi Shiwen was also a little curious. As for the specific reason, it wasn't explained in the part of the inheritance that I obtained. However, according to my speculation, it should be very likely. Yi Qianqian's small face stuck to Yi Shiwen's chest as she said, "It should be because the path they walk is different, and the way to achieve transcendence is different. The Lord of the underworld wants to establish reincarnation and act on behalf of the heavens. He wants to achieve transcendence by balancing life and death. However, the Emperor of the underworld's method is even more extreme. He wants to use the netherworld to rule the world, and strive to achieve transcendence by using the lives of all living beings. These 2 completely different paths are in intense conflict. The Lord of the underworld seeks a balanced reincarnation, while the Emperor of the underworld's method is even more intense. In the end, it caused both sides to fall out completely. Perhaps this is the reason," Yi Qianqian said. Although it was just a guess, she believed that there shouldn't be any problem. Achieve transcendence? Yi Shiwen still couldn't fully understand. Perhaps that was the pursuit of an emperor. For him, there was nothing more important than attaining the Tao and becoming an emperor. However, just from Yi Qianshan's description, he knew that it was only a matter of time before the two fell out. Not only were their paths completely different, but they even clashed violently. The Lord of the Underworld's 6 paths of reincarnation was definitely a balance between life and death. The living would enter reincarnation, and the dead would go to the afterlife. If they followed the path of the Emperor of the Underworld, to rule the world and turn the myriad realms into the netherworld, then the 6 paths of reincarnation would be complete nonsense. No wonder they fell out in the end, and even faced each other with life and death. Different paths couldn't work together, not to mention these were intensely conflicting paths. However, Yi Qianshan's words made him instantly vigilant. Apart from the unknown factor of the Emperor of the Underworld, this was the first time he heard that there might be an Emperor of the Underworld still alive. Unlike the others who guessed that the demonic sovereign might still be alive, from Yi Qianshan's words, the probability of the Emperor of the Underworld still being alive was too high. With such an existence that wanted to rule the myriad realms and turn the myriad realms into the netherworld, the already chaotic situation had become even more chaotic. Compared to the exposed heavenly clan, the underworld that was hidden in the dark was even more worrying. Now that you have obtained the inheritance of the Lord of the Underworld, doesn't that mean that you are the future Lord of the Underworld? Will the remaining forces of the underworld listen to your commands? Yi Shiwen asked. It should be very difficult. Even if I have obtained the inheritance of the Lord of the Underworld, they have been independent for so many years. Yi Qianshan said uncertainly. It doesn't matter. If they are not convinced, then we will beat them until they are convinced. The underworld must be eradicated, not only because of the grudge between the underworld and the underworld, but also because of their wild ambitions. More importantly, your inheritance has been exposed to the underworld, and they will not let you go. This battle will happen sooner or later, and there is no escaping it. Yi Shiwen hugged Yi Qianshan tightly. Even though the opponent was the underworld, a colossus that had existed for countless years, he had never thought of abandoning Yi Qianshan. The only thought in his mind was how to take the initiative and get rid of the underworld. Yes. Yi Qianshan also hugged Yi Shiwen tightly, but you must be careful. The underworld and the underworld both have the ability to transform the power of the dead into their own. For countless years, no one knows how many peerless masters the underworld has resurrected. It can be said that all the Emperor's inheritances are not as many as the masters of the underworld. I understand. Sooner or later, I will bring you back to the underworld, but before that, I have to go out and collect some interest. Chapter 2853. The outside world was still immersed in the shock brought by Yi Shiwen's retribution. Originally, a person's retribution, even if it was a quasi-emperor retribution, should not have shocked the entire universe. But in Yi Shiwen's retribution, there was actually a confrontation of Dao Tool level, which completely shocked the entire universe. In the past, such a scene would only appear when a real emperor achieved enlightenment. In fact, many emperors were unknown when they achieved enlightenment, not to mention such a grand welcoming ceremony. However, Yi Shiwen was the one who did it. How could this not shock everyone? While everyone was still in shock, the universe could see that in the universe, a golden light crossed half of the universe, like a golden rainbow bridge, directly crossing half of the universe. What is this? Who is doing such a high-profile thing? This movement quickly attracted everyone's attention, but soon someone confirmed that the person on the golden rainbow bridge was none other than Yi Shiwen. Where is he going? Everyone was a little puzzled. They didn't know where Yi Shiwen was going, not to hide, rest, and consolidate his quasi-emperor realm at this time. This golden rainbow bridge crossed the entire universe, and no one knew how many spaces it crossed, going further and further. Some people could already see it. This is the world of the Tian clan. As Yi Shiwen tore open the space, everyone discovered that a celestial race's world had appeared in front of them. This world was hidden in countless spaces. It was impossible to discover it. If Yi Shiwen didn't tear open the space barrier, no one would discover it. In this regard, the Tian clan did a very good job. Otherwise, they would have been wiped out by the experts of the various clans in the universe over the years. Although there was a lot of filth between the clans, only when facing the Tian clan, they were completely united, which was to kill them all. Once the Tian clan's disaster broke out, it would not harm a single clan, but all the clans in the universe, and all clans would be involved. What was Yi Shiwen trying to do? Directly breaking into the lair of a heavenly race? Although he was very strong, directly breaking into the lair of a heavenly race was not advisable in the past, not to mention that the majority of the heavenly race had come out now. He was simply courting death. The lair of the Tian clan was extremely extraordinary. Countless formations filled the air, and Tao marks appeared. Anyone who was here would be greatly suppressed, just like how people who were not from the human clan would be greatly suppressed unless they made a sound in the heaven realm. What, Yi Shiwen is here? When Yi Shiwen arrived, the commotion was too big, and it quickly alarmed the entire Tian clan world. Is he courting death? A puny human actually dares to charge in single-handedly, truly courting death. It's hard to say. You have to know that this guy just did something earth-shattering. Many Tao weapons were used, but none of them could do anything to him. Even the Emperor corpse was taken away by him. But even so, his guts are too big. Many experts of the Tian clan were shocked and angry. One after another, they flew up and faced Yi Shiwen from afar. What was Yi Shiwen trying to do? He actually directly broke into the lair. This was clearly not putting them in his eyes. It was simply a great humiliation. Human, this is the central world, stop! An expert shouted. If it was in the past, they might have been faced with a formidable enemy. But now, in the universe, the Tian clan had the advantage, so they had nothing to worry about. If you don't stop, don't blame us for making a move. Yi Shiwen walked over step by step, and the eye of redemption appeared in his eyes. The expert who shouted didn't even have time to react. He only felt himself being torn apart by a huge force and instantly exploded. Bang! The expert was instantly torn apart and turned into a bloody mist that filled the sky. Yi Shiwen's aura instantly erupted. In an instant it swept through the entire world. Whether it was the ordinary Tian clan experts or the Tian clan gods, all of them knelt down, completely prostrated. This was because the deterrence of the Tao weapons on his body had directly erupted. It was as if a real emperor had descended, invincible, like a storm, sweeping in all directions. These experts of the Tian clan who had wanted to stop Yi Shiwen just now could only tremble now. They couldn't even muster the slightest bit of resistance. If they weren't quasi-emperors, it was too difficult to resist Yi Shiwen's astonishing deterrence. Yi Shiwen walked all the way to the core of the Tian clan world. This was where the central dynasty of the Tian clan was located. This was a very secretive world. For countless years, no one had been able to discover it. The specific location of the central dynasty had been discovered by Yi Shiwen. Naturally, it was all thanks to the central crown prince, who had pointed out the way for him. Through the blood and flesh of the central crown prince, Yi Shiwen very easily deduced the location of the central dynasty. Everything in the world was closely connected. No one could be completely separated from the world. This was why he was able to deduce the location. Yi Shiwen simply didn't care what the others were thinking. He directly charged into the core of the central realm. Yi Shiwen, you still dare to come? A loud roar rang out from the core of the central realm. Suddenly, it formed a sound wave that filled the sky. Dense divine light surged out like a surging wave. Why wouldn't I dare to come? You should know very well why I am here. Yi Shiwen said coldly. What exactly are you trying to say? The loud voice roared. Previously, when I was undergoing my tribulation, the Central Dynasty should have been one of the people who sent people over. How extravagant! You even sent the divine shell of a quasi-emperor there. How extravagant! Yi Shiwen said with a cold smile. Coincidentally, I ran into some trouble while I was cultivating. I happen to lack some resources, so I'll borrow the treasury of your race. The creatures in the central realm finally understood why Yi Shiwen had come to kill them. It turned out that there was such a thing. The decision to kill Yi Shiwen had been made by the higher-up. Most people were not aware of this. In fact, they had only received news of Yi Shiwen's tribulation later. Who would have thought that Yi Shiwen would come to kill them? However, they immediately felt that this was very absurd. Why would Yi Shiwen come to them? Logically speaking, given the opposition between the celestial race and the various realms, it was normal for them to target each other. Why did Yi Shiwen's words make them feel like they had stabbed their ally? You are courting death. Do you really think that we cannot destroy you? If we had not been afraid of your heavenly tribulation, do you think that you would have survived? A furious voice rang out from the core region. You are nothing more than this. When I trampled the Tianqi dynasty, you were not this arrogant. Yi Shiwen said coldly. The Tianqi dynasty? Humph. The Tianqi dynasty was also destroyed by your hands? That's great. You owe another debt of blood to the celestial race. Since you want to die today, I shall grant you your wish. The voice said, showing no signs of weakness. Die. Yi Shiwen said indifferently. Then, he made his move. His foot stomped down on the entire central realm. In an instant, the sky collapsed and the earth cracked. Heaven and earth shook. Countless clouds in the sky instantly dispersed, as if they were about to collapse under this stomp. Yi Shiwen had actually made his move. He clearly did not care about the entire central realm. Don't be so arrogant, the powerful being said anxiously and angrily. Whoosh! Suddenly, an astonishing blade light rushed over. Countless words of the Great Path appeared on this blade light. Rather than saying that they were engraved, it was more accurate to say that they had completely appeared on the surface of the blade. This was something that could only happen when the Great Path was completely integrated into the blade light. This blade light sliced through the world and slashed towards Yi Shiwen's foot. Boom! When the two attacks collided, it caused the entire world to tremble. Everything was shaking violently. Yi Shiwen's foot crushed the blade light. However, he did not have the strength to go any further. Immediately afterward, a figure pounced on the spot. The figure grew with the wind, and like a mountain, an indomitable figure appeared between heaven and earth. It was a middle-aged man in an imperial robe, and his whole body was filled with an ultimate domineering aura. Could it be the old central heavenly king? I think he is the father of the current central heavenly king. In the distance, many powerhouses used magic techniques to observe the situation. However, they did not dare approach. Furthermore, they were too far away, so they could not use their divine senses to observe the battle. Many people were shocked when they saw this figure. Didn't they say that he died in the Second Anti-Heavenly War? How could he still be alive? What's so strange about him being alive? He was just sealed and exiled. No one has really confirmed his death. This time, Yi Shiwen has kicked an iron plate. If it was the previous Central Dynasty, the army of the Heavenly Clan had not returned. With Yi Shiwen's strength, it was indeed enough to sweep the Central Dynasty. It would not be difficult for him to kill back and forth in the Central Dynasty. However, the situation is completely different now. Although they have been fighting with the Heavenly Clan for a period of time, no one knows how many masters have returned from the Heavenly Clan. However, many masters must have returned from the heavenly dynasty. Yi Shiwen is still too arrogant. Are you the one who wants to kill me? I feel a familiar aura on you, Yi Shiwen said coldly. Although he was crossing the tribulation previously and did not pursue the matter directly, he still remembered the aura of the divine shell that had been possessed. Otherwise, he would not have come to him. So what if I am? Said the old central heavenly king coldly. Then die. Chapter 2854. Then die. Yi Shiwen said coldly. Young man, you are very confident and strong. Among all the people I have seen since ancient times, there are not many who can stand shoulder to shoulder with you. However, this world is not what you think it is. No matter how strong you are, you still have to pay the price. The old central heavenly king said coldly. Kill! The old central heavenly king attacked instantly. Countless rays of cold light erupted from his body and rushed directly into the universe. Countless arrays felt this amazing power at this moment and were all awakened. These arrays that were set up by the central heavenly king countless years ago were fully awakened. Bursts of divine light burst out, protecting the entire world from completely collapsing due to the battle. Central Heavenly King Fist. The old Central Heavenly King roared and punched out, causing the world to collapse. Yi Shiwen, although your 6 paths of reincarnation fist is powerful, this isn't the only fist technique in the world. On Yi Shiwen's body, colorful divine light flickered and the power of time flowed. This battle broke out in an instant. Yi Shiwen directly attacked and suppressed the old central heavenly king with the 6 paths of reincarnation fist. Boom! 2 peerless and tyrannical fist techniques collided directly, and all kinds of strange phenomena broke out instantly. The terrifying fist wind overturned everything, and the entire world was rumbling and trembling. The terrifying power was still spreading at an amazing speed. Buzz. In the void, Yi Shiwen's body swayed slightly, and his hands directly tore apart the collapsing energy tide. The demon wings behind him instantly spread out, and he directly rushed in front of the old central heavenly king. Overturning the sky seal. A huge seal formed in the sky, like an ancient divine mountain smashing down fiercely. At this moment, this blow cut through the eternal peace of the universe, directly shattering everything. Runes appeared one after another, communicating with the world. The energy of the world surged at this moment. The power of the overturning the sky seal communicating with the world was fully reflected in Yi Shiwen's body. The old central heavenly king did not hesitate at all. He directly transformed the central heavenly king body and blasted out a punch towards Yi Shiwen. The eruption of both sides instantly shocked the world. Unparalleled power. Tao symbols appeared one after another, and then they actually began to burn. The dazzling light between the two burned intensely. Who would have thought that both sides would go all out as soon as they came up? The old central heavenly king didn't even have the intention to probe. As soon as he came up, he directly released the central emperor body and fought with Yi Shiwen. The battle between the two had surpassed the peak. In that instant, the power that erupted from both sides crossed the vast skies. This was an astonishing battle that had occurred countless years ago. No one knew where Yi Shiwen was when the old central heavenly king was running amok in the world. But now, he was fighting with this top master from countless years ago. Back then, the old central heavenly king was extremely powerful and could move unhindered under the heavens. Now, he was even at the peak of the quasi-emperor and was one of the strongest people in the world. Even under the situation of the Tian clan's invasion, he was still one of the experts with books. But now, he was going to have an astonishing battle with Yi Shiwen. This Yi Shiwen is too capricious. He used a Tao tool just because he said so. Many people couldn't help but gnash their teeth in hatred when they saw this scene. Of course, they understood that with Yi Shiwen's current skills, Even if he had entered the quasi-emperor level, he was still not worth mentioning compared to an old monster like the old central heavenly king who had lived for tens of thousands of years. In the eyes of everyone, even if Yi Shiwen was a genius, the skills that the old central heavenly king had accumulated over a long period of time were enough to crush all strong enemies. Living for a long time was the biggest advantage. Now Yi Shiwen actually blocked the attack of the old central heavenly king. Naturally, he relied on the time robe. Moreover, everyone was very clear that he still had a Dao tool in his hands that he hadn't used yet. How extravagant was it for one person to have two Dao tools in his hands? It should be known that even a colossus like the Dragon Island only had one Dao tool. Having one Dao tool was enough to make him invincible, let alone having two. It was useless for ordinary people to obtain a Dao tool. Unless the Dao tool was in the hands of an emperor, they could only hope that the tool spirit existing in it would awaken on its own. Only then would it be possible to erupt with the most powerful power. Every awakening required a huge amount of power. Unless one was the descendant of the emperor, it was impossible to awaken them. But Yi Shiwen was different. After obtaining the recognition of the Avicii sword, it actually awakened him to fight against many Dao tools. Some people even said that Yi Shiwen should have obtained the inheritance of the Avicii Hell Lord. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to obtain the recognition of the Avicii sword. There had never been such a situation since ancient times. How arrogant were the tool spirits of Dao tools! They even followed the emperor to conquer the world in the past. How could ordinary people enter their eyes? Even the descendants of the imperial monarchs had to be respectful and worship them as their ancestors. Unless it was a time of life and death, they wouldn't take the initiative to wake them up in order to reduce consumption. Without the imperial monarchs in this world, who could completely wake them up? What they didn't know was that Yi Shiwen had suppressed and refined the Avicii sword. Of course, he could not forcibly awaken the tool spirit of the Avicii sword for him. However, both parties had now formed a quasi-alliance relationship. Yi Shiwen would not awaken it normally, but after all, he had obtained the recognition of the Avicii sword. This was not easy for him. After all, the Avicii sword was different from Yimo. When Yimo fell into Yi Shiwen's hands, it was already broken. The Avicii sword was still at its peak. After devouring the Tianqi Emperor's sword, it became stronger. Once it fully unleashed its true strength, it could even completely block the Emperor's corpse with its own strength and completely suppress it. If he did not hesitate to consume his own origin, Yi Shiwen believed that there should be a way to kill the Emperor's corpse. However, the Avicii sword would not burn its origin for Yi Shiwen. After all, it was not Yimo. The other thing that everyone was also very clear about was the time robe. They found the records about the time robe from the ancient books. They were also very clear that the tool spirit of the time robe had been shattered. It could not exert the power of the time robe. However, the conditions needed to truly use the time robe were much lower. There was no need to obtain the recognition of the time robe's tool spirit. However, many people only felt a chill down their spine when they slightly calculated how many emperor origins were needed. More people were speechless. Did Yi Shiwen really dig up an emperor's tomb? Otherwise, where did he get so many emperor origins? This was almost comparable to all the Empyrean emperors' inheritances. Empyrean emperor's origin. However, the Empyrean emperor's inheritances. Empyrean emperor's origin had to be provided to many people. Moreover, it had to be kept just in case one awakened a Dao artifact. In the eyes of others, Yi Shiwen was simply a wastrel. He was so extravagant that he used the emperor origin to activate the tool to fight for himself. In the outside world, there were endless rumors about Yi Shiwen digging up an emperor's tomb. Many people began to consider whether there was such a possibility. In their opinion, it was most likely that he had really dug up the tomb of Hell Lord Avicii. Not only had he obtained the Avicii sword, but he had also obtained a huge amount of emperor origins. Only then could he support such a battle. Yi Shiwen, who had 2 tools in his hands, could not be considered invincible in the world. After all, there was still the existence of Fire Dragon True Monarch, Mahasvara, and the others. If these people also had the tools in their hands, they would be in a completely new realm. They would be invincible. However, even so, Yi Shiwen was terrifying enough in the eyes of many people. He had already become the most threatening person. Such a young and hot-headed person was the most terrifying. Because he was young, he was fearless. Moreover, he had formidable strength. He was like a child who had a knife in his hand. However, he didn't have many misgivings like an adult. He would attack whenever he wanted to. He was like a ticking time bomb. He had killed his way into the central great world. Normal people would not do this unless they were crazy. Yi Shiwen naturally knew what everyone thought. However, he didn't care. He had his reasons, and he couldn't afford to delay. He had a premonition that the final battle would arrive very soon. He wanted to attain the supreme Tao before that happened. As for the emperor origins, they were just worldly possessions. As long as he attained the Tao in the future, he wouldn't have to worry about not having enough emperor origins. Of course, outsiders didn't know this, because they couldn't understand it. This was an indescribable feeling. The end of everything was about to arrive very soon. However, everyone knew that even though Yi Shiwen was a wealthy prodigal, he probably lacked emperor origins. That was why he had killed his way into the grand central great world to seize the treasury. He was most likely planning something big. Of course, ordinary people definitely didn't have the ability to do so. However, Yi Shiwen had the help of a Tao tool. The central great world had been passed down by the prime heavenly emperor and hadn't been broken through for many years. There had to be an astonishing amount of wealth inside. Perhaps it could allow his cultivation level to improve further and reach unimaginable limit. While everyone was letting their imaginations run wild, the battle between Yi Shiwen and the old central heavenly king had already reached its climax. Yi Shiwen, coming to the central great world today was the worst decision you've ever made. I wasn't able to kill you during your tribulation transcendence. Today I will do it myself. The old central heavenly king was extremely powerful. He had previously been afraid of Yi Shiwen's heavenly tribulation and hadn't dared make a move personally. Otherwise, he would have been wiped out by the heavenly tribulation and wouldn't have been allowed to challenge the authority of the heavenly Tao. However, things were different now. Without the heavenly tribulation, he was fearless and had nothing to fear. The entire central continent was shaking violently. If it weren't for the protection of the Sovereign Lord's magic arrays, it would have broken apart long ago. Even so, it was like boiling water, churning non-stop, on the verge of breaking apart at any moment. "It's time," Yi Shiwen said coldly as he opened his eyes. "You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.